Chapter 17. Terry Boot is frozen in shock at the sight that greets him. There, sprawled out across a sofa in the Ravenclaw common room with his nose in a book, is a Slytherin. And not just any Slytherin, Draco Odinson, the boy who was kidnapped. When he was a child, Terry had always thought Odinson's story to be a sad one. His great-aunt had told him it wasn't really a kidnapping, but that the boy had been born into a dark wizarding family, and then sold to the Odinson family so that they could bribe their way out of being convicted of war crimes. It was horrifying to imagine being thrown away by your family like that. For a moment after Odinson's name was called during the sorting ceremony, Terry almost hoped that the blonde boy would be sorted into Ravenclaw too, so that maybe they could be friends. But after hearing what had happened on the train, Terry knew he had to stay far away from Odinson. And Potter, too. It had been quite the shock to hear that the hero who had defeated you-know-who was a Parselmouth and attacked someone on the way to Hogwarts. Seriously, what kind of deranged people would threaten to have a snake eat Weasley's pet rat? So it is with great effort that Terry pushes down his first instinct to yell curses at the intruder. His self-preservation instinct helps him back away slowly, reminding him that he has no idea whether anyone is even around to aid him if Odinson decides to throw a dark hex. Terry wouldn't be surprised if Odinson drew his wand in response to a demand to know why he is in Ravenclaw's common room. His housemates have heard that Pansy Parkinson says that the blonde Slytherin is just barely hanging onto sanity. Fortunately for Terry, said Slytherin continues to be oblivious to his presence as he walks quietly back out into the hallway. A plan crystallizes in Terry's mind as he decides he must get a prefect as soon as possible so that they can catch Odinson in the act of trespassing. He rushes swiftly to where he last remembers seeing the Ravenclaw prefects talking to each other along the staircase. "You have to come help," he half shouts to them as soon as Robert Hilliard and Penny Clearwater come into view. They walk quickly towards him in response to his obvious distress. "There's a snake in the common room," Terry says frantically. The Ravenclaw prefects look at him with a mixture of alarm and confusion as they start following Terry back to the common room. Once they get to the stone statue at the entrance, Hilliard requests that the riddle be a short one because there's a pressing situation inside. After they answer, the stone wall slides open and Terry steps aside to allow the prefects to enter first. He hears Clearwater gasp in shock. "What in Merlin's name?" she shrieks in outrage. A startled Odinson looks over and his eyes widen at the sight of the prefects. Terry looks over to Hilliard, whose face iswait, highly amused. And so Terry feels the satisfaction of a job well done and can't help but grin as he turns his attention back to the spectacle unfolding in front of them. He's done his duty, and now the snake will get what's coming to him. "This is the last time. No more warnings." Clearwater waves her hands angrily as she continues her admonishment. "He's done this before," Terry thinks, "and I'm the one who caught him. Ha!" The Slytherin swings his feet over to the floor and jumps up, putting his hands up defensively as Clearwater stalks towards him. "No feet on the sofa," the prefect berates. "Next time you do it, I really will take points. Honestly." "What kind of poor guest are you?" Before he can process Clearwater, referring to Odinson as Aegst, Terry feels someone else enter the common room behind him and hears the newcomer greet Hilliard. "Hey, Robert. Hey, Harry." Terry's jaw drops as Harry Potter walks past him and casually greets Clearwater enthusiastically. "Hello, Penny," Potter says cheerfully and pulls something out of his pocket. "I powdered this in my mortar. It should be much more effective than the crushed variety that's in the potion stores." "Thank you, Harry," Clearwater says and smiles at him with obvious affection. Terry's lost the plot somewhere. The prefects are acting as if the Ravenclaw common room isn't being invaded by Slytherins. "Shouldn't these Slytherins be in their own common room?" Terry demands, voice pitching higher than he had planned. Everyone turns to look at him. Odinson tilts his head like a curious bird, grey eyes assessing. "Oh, did you not know?" Odinson asks, not unkindly. Michael Corner invited me weeks ago when we were debating Skyball versus Quidditch in Transfiguration. And well, your common room door opens to anyone clever enough to answer the riddle. It would be rather unfair to be angry at someone from another house for being clever enough to get in, wouldn't it? But you're a Slytherin, Terry sputters. Yeah, the Slytherin couches are leather, Potter adds, as if that explains everything. And they're always cold. These ones are fluffy, Odinson says with a sigh. Hilliard turns to him. Boot, Odinson and Potter have been coming here to study for the past month. Penny and I approved it after they promised to follow all house rules. He shoots Odinson a pointed look. Including the one about feet on the furniture. Terry doesn't know what to say. The boy who lived and the boy who was kidnapped have been studying in the Ravenclaw common room for a month, and no one told him. Roman too need to sit down, Terry manages. Not on the sofa I was using, Odinson says. I'm not done with my chapter. Remember, no feet on the sofa, Penny shouts at them before exiting the common room. Theodore Nott has been observing the strange pair of Odinson and Potter for weeks now. The odds would say that the lost heir should have remained hidden away forever, never to attend Hogwarts, and that the boy who lived would sort Gryffindor like his parents. He hated the confusion that came upon him when both of these unknown variables were sorted into his house. His mother had practiced a mad sort of arithmancy obsessivelian obscure branch, which was deemed unreliable for the reason that intuition played a large role in its formulas. When Theo was a child, numbers were a more common sight than letters. Number patterns chosen by his mother, which she painted with loving care into intricate motifs, adorned the walls of his room like silent guardians whispering words of favor. He played among his mother's charts and traced the numbers with his little fingers. To him, there wasn't much difference between the language that numbers spoke and the one that letters conveyed. Numbers revealed reality just as clearly, if not more so at times. What he did wasn't quite arithmancy, though there were certainly elements of it in his calculations. He just knows that the numbers do not lie to him, and that somehow the odds were born into his brain after the shock of seeing his mother collapse on the date she predicted her own death. Theo relies on the odds because they create a framework of security. Even if they couldn't quite tell him exactly how everything would go, it was more than enough. The odds told him that Crabbe and Goyle would more than likely follow him around during the day because his father's position was higher than theirs. He had been prepared to avoid them and endure their intrusions on his cherished solitude in their clumsy attempts to gain favor and status. It is because of the odds that he has the utmost certainty in the superiority of purebloods. And yet, these two will not fit into his established predictability models. Probabilities told him that someone who struggled with charms, as if they might as well be a squib, should not be a transfiguration prodigy. It made no sense when transfiguration, by all measures, was the more complex and difficult subject. Probabilities told him that two boys who had been rumored to have assaulted a fellow student on the train should be social pariahs, yet they seemed to have allies in every house. Probabilities told him that Zabina calculating, self-serving Zabini would never genuinely befriend anyone. Yet Theo has watched the other boys' careful artifice melt away over the past weeks when dealing with Odinson and Potter. It is infuriating. He watches now as Zabini slides into a seat next to Odinson at dinner, laughing at something Potter has said. The three of them look almost like friends. Theo's lip curls in disgust. Your desperation to form an allegiance is even more pathetic than Crabbe and Goyle's clumsy attempts. He had hissed at Zabini weeks ago. And when you try to turn them against each other, they'll both abandon you like the trash you are. But Zabini hasn't turned them against each other. He's wormed his way into their little circle with his Latin lessons and his carefully curated information. And Odinson and Potter seem to have accepted him. The odds don't account for genuine friendship forming in Slytherin House. The odds say that alliances are transactional, that every relationship is built on exchange of value. That sentiment is weakness. And yet, Theo stabs at his potatoes and wonders if perhaps his mother's formulas weren't as complete as he'd believed. The weeks blur together in a rhythm that Draco is slowly growing accustomed to. Every morning before dawn, he rises and runs the grounds of Hogwarts. At first, he had been frustrated by the lack of a proper training post. The trees near the castle were either too young or protected by various enchantments. But then Hagrid had mentioned the Whomping Willow. "Don't go punching the Whomping Willow, because it'll hit your back," Draco had been delighted. Now, every other morning finds him in a clearing with the murderous tree, dodging its violent branches and getting in strikes when he can. It's not quite the same as sparring with the Einherjar or practicing with Aunt Sif, but it's close enough. The tree is a challenging sparring partner in its own right, has to rely on his training and on the instincts that his father has drilled into him for years. He's covered in bruises most of the time now, but they heal fast. Another rhythm that has developed is the prank war with the Weasley twins that has been gradually escalating. It started because of Ron, of course. The Ginger Menace had apparently told his brothers some wildly exaggerated version of what happened on the train, painting Harry and Draco as dark wizards who had tried to murder him and his rat. The twins had taken it upon themselves to exact revenge. The first volley was a leglocker curse that caught Draco unaware in the corridor. He had to hop to the hospital wing because he couldn't figure out the counter-curse charms, after all, remained his nemesis. His retaliation was more creative. An illusion of a massive spider on the Gryffindor table during dinner one night. The startled screams were quite satisfying, and best of all, the illusion faded without anyone suspecting him. Although Dumbledore had raised an eyebrow at Draco, no points were deducted. So Draco counted that as his win. By some unspoken agreement, the war had somehow evolved into something more complexless about direct attacks and more about outdoing each other in pranking theater houses. Neither side could explicitly take credit, which made it all the more satisfying. Weird how a bunch of Ravenclaws lost their voices for half the day yesterday, Fred, or George, had said at breakfast as he passed their table, eyeing them speculatively. "Oh, really?" Harry replied innocently. "They aren't very vocal, so I suppose no one would have noticed. Isn't it odd that half of the Hufflepuff first years seem to have turned their hair red?" Draco added, fighting to keep his face neutral. "You know," George or Fred said slowly, "it doesn't really look that way in this light." Harry came up with the potions nothing harmful, just embarrassing or inconvenient, and Draco practiced his illusions to find creative ways of delivering them. It was good training, actually. Every prank forced him to refine his technique, to hold complex illusions longer, to make them more convincing. His father visited him in dreams a few more times over the many weeks. Each visit was a balm to Draco's soul. His father helped him work through the Allspeak problem, suggesting exercises to help Draco distinguish between languages even when Allspeak translated them automatically. "You must learn to hear the shape-off words," his father had advised. "Not their meaning. Allspeak gives you meaning. You need to feel the sounds themselves." It was working, slowly. Draco was starting to notice a difference when Zabini spoke Latin versus Englischer texture, almost beneath the translation. Like running his fingers over silk versus cotton when both looked identical. He still couldn't cast a single charm, but he was getting closer. He could feel it. And then it was Halloween. Harry has been dreading this day for weeks. He doesn't tell Draco why. He doesn't tell anyone. But as October 31st dawns grey and cold, the weight of it settles on his shoulders like a physical thing. This was the day his parents died. He should be excited about the Halloween feast everyone else is. The Great Hall has been decorated with live bats and pumpkins the size of garden sheds. There are rumors of a spectacular dessert course. Draco has been talking about wanting to try something called treacle tart that he's only read about. But Harry can't muster any enthusiasm. He goes through his classes in a haze, barely responding when Draco nudges him with questions. His scar hasn't hurt today, which is unusual given how often it's been aching lately. Small mercies. It's near the end of the day when they're walking past a bathroom when Harry hears it. Ron Weasley's voice, carrying clearly through the corridor. No wonder she hasn't got any friends. She's a nightmare, honestly. Harry sees Hermione Granger rush past them, tears streaming down her face. Their eyes meet for a brief moment, green to brown, and he sees her flinch, as if expecting cruelty from him too. Then she's gone, the bathroom door slamming behind her. Draco's eyes narrow. That evil little weasel, he mutters. What did Granger ever do to him? She corrected him in charms today, Harry says quietly, said he was pronouncing the spell wrong. So he made her cry because she was right. Draco's voice drips with contempt. Norns, what a pathetic creature. Hours later, as students stream toward the great hall for the feast, Draco grabs Harry's arm. Wait. What? Did Granger ever come out of that bathroom? Harry frowns. He's been so lost in his own thoughts during the day that he hadn't thought about it. I don't know. Draco's jaw sets in a way Harry has come to recognize. It means his friend has made a decision and nothing will sway him from it. Come on. Draco, the feast, will still be there, such as it is. Not that I'm expecting much of one. Draco is already striding back toward the bathroom. I'm not leaving some poor girl crying in a toilet because the evil Weasley insulted her. Harry follows, because of course he does. That's what Shield brothers do. When they reach the bathroom, Draco bangs on the door. Anyone in there who's not Granger? No answer. No. All right, Granger. We're coming in. But that's the girls' bathroom, Harry hisses. Draco points to a sign on the door that Harry could have sworn wasn't there a moment ago. It reads, out of order, closed for repairs. Don't worry, Draco says with a small smirk. It's closed for repairs. Before Harry can object further, Draco pushes the door open and walks in. Harry has no choice but to follow. The bathroom is dim and damp, the sound of quiet sobbing echoing off the stone walls. They find Hermione in the last stall, curled up on the closed toilet seat with her arms wrapped around her knees. Go away, she says, her voice thick with tears. Can't do that, Draco says, leaning against the wall opposite her stall. I've made a decision, you see, and I never go back on my decisions. Very stubborn, my father says. It's both a strength and a flaw. I don't want to talk. That's fine. I can talk enough for both of us. And he does. For nearly half an hour, Draco talks. He talks about Skyball and how it's clearly superior to Quidditch. He talks about the Whomping Willow and how it's been the best sparring partner he's found at Hogwarts. He talks about his frustration with charms and how sometimes the things you expect to be easy turn out to be the hardest. Harry doesn't say much. He just stands there, a quiet presence, occasionally nodding when Draco glances his way. The weight of the day is still on him, the knowledge of what this date means, but there's something almost comforting about listening to Draco ramble. Eventually, Hermione sniffles quiet. Why are you doing this? She asks finally, her voice small. Everyone says you're dark wizards, that you attacked Ron on the train. Do you believe everything everyone says? Draco asks mildly. No, but Weasley called me a bastard and insulted my dead mother. Harry punched him for it. That's what happened on the train. Draco's voice is matter of fact. People believe what they want to believe. Labels only have power if you let them. There's a pause. That's actually quite insightful. I have my moments. Hermione laughs wetly. It's not much of a laugh, but it's something. Why do you even care? She asks. We've never even spoken before. You're clever, Draco says simply. McGonagall said your transfiguration theory was the best she's seen from a first year in a decade. And I've been wanting to talk to you about Gamp's laws of elemental transfiguration, because I have some theories about why food can't be conjured from nothing, but Harry smells it before he hears it. A stench, awful and unmistakable like rotting vegetables and old socks and something dead. The ground trembles slightly, and then a massive, lumpy grey shape shuffles into the bathroom doorway, blocking out the light. A mountain troll, 12 feet tall, skin like granite, tiny stupid eyes, and a club the size of a small tree. Well, Harry thinks distantly as Hermione screams, and Yer hisses with alarm from his sleeve. That's probably not supposed to be here. Draco, remarkably, is grinning. Heimdall, he breathes, his grey eyes bright with something that Harry has come to recognize as his best friend's particular brand of insanity. This is going to be brilliant. How in the Nine Realms did a troll get in here? The mountain troll roars, its breath washing over them like a wave of decay. Hermione screams. Harry is already moving, putting himself between her and the creature. Draco's hand goes to the knife at his belton of the throwing blades his father gave him, small enough to be concealed, but balanced perfectly for his grip. He doesn't think, he just throws. The knife hits the troll square in the chest and bounces off. Norns curse it, Draco hisses as the blade clatters uselessly to the flooded floor. The troll's hide is too thick, like trying to pierce stone with a needle. The creature doesn't even seem to notice the impact. It does, however, notice him. The troll swings its club in a wide arc. Draco dives, rolling through the ankle-deep water, but the edge of the club catches the row of sinks behind where he'd been standing. Porcelain explodes outward. Hermione screams again. "The door," Harry shouts. "We need to get to the door." But the troll is between them and their only exit. Its tiny, stupid eyes are fixed on Draco now, perhaps recognizing him as the one who threw the pointy thing. Draco's mind races. He can't hurt it with blades. He can't cast charms. But heckin' an illusion shimmers into existence at the far end of the bathroom. Another Draco, waving its arms and shouting. The troll's head swivels toward the movement, confusion crossing its brutish features. "Go!" Draco shouts at Harry and Hermione. "Get to the door while it's distracted." Harry grabs Hermione's arm and they run, splashing through the water toward the exit. The troll is still staring at the illusory Draco, club raised uncertainly. But illusions on such simple creatures don't hold long. The troll can probably smell that the fake Draco isn't real, or sense the lack of body heat, or the illusion flickers. The troll roars in fury and spins back toward the real children. Its club sweeps sideways, catching a stall divider and sending wooden debris exploding across the room. A jagged piece of woodwork used to be part of a door skids across the floor toward Draco. An idea strikes him. Draco grabs the wood and focuses. Transfiguration doesn't require incantations the way charms doits about will and visualization and belief. He pictures what he wants, a blade, sharp and strong, something that can actually hurt. The wood shifts in his hands, lengthening, hardening, the grain compressing and transforming. In seconds, he's holding a rough sword, not elegant, not balanced properly, but sharp. The edge gleams in the dim light. Harry, the club, Harry understands immediately. His wand comes up, and Draco hears the incantation Wingardium Leviosa. The troll's massive club wrenches itself from the creature's grip, rising into the air. The troll looks up at its floating weapon with an expression of profound bewilderment. Draco charges. He's trained for this. Not fighting trolls specifically, but fighting things bigger than him, stronger than him. The key is to use their size against them. He ducks under the troll's grasping hand, slides between its legs on the slick floor, and drives his transfigured sword into the back of its knee. The troll screams. Its working blade is sharp enough to pierce the hide where it's thinner at the joint. But as the creature buckles, its arm sweeps backward in blind agony. Draco tries to dodge, but he's not quite fast enough. The impact catches his left arm and sends him flying. He hits the wall hard. Something cracks. Pain explodes through his arm, white-hot and nauseating. Draco crumples to the floor, gasping, his vision swimming. "Draco!" Harry's voice, terrified. Through the haze of pain, Draco sees Harry's face set in determination. The levitated club is still hovering above the troll, which is now limping and furious. Harry releases the spell. The club drops. 12 feet of solid wood connects with the top of the troll's skull with a sickening crack. The troll sways and topples forward, crashing to the floor with a thud that shakes the entire bathroom. Silence. Draco lies against the wall, cradling his arm, trying to breathe through the pain. His left arm is definitely broken, can feel the wrongness of it, the way the bone has shifted. The rune beneath his father's heart will be burning right now. His father will know something is wrong. Draco! Harry splashes through the water to his side, face pale with worry. Your arm? Broken. Draco manages through gritted teeth. I'm fine. It's fine. You are very much not fine. Hermione has appeared on his other side, her earlier terror replaced by fierce concern. You need the hospital wing immediately. Can you stand? Draco tries. The movement jostles his arm and he nearly blacks out. Give me a moment. We don't have a moment. Hermione looks toward the door. The professors will have heard Hermione will come. As if on cue, the bathroom door bursts open. Professor McGonagall stands in the doorway, her face white with shock. Behind her, Snape appears, his dark eyes sweeping the scene-unconscious troll, 3 first-years, one of them clearly injured. What on earth? McGonagall begins. Draco, despite the pain, manages a weak grin. Would you believe the troll started it? Chapter 18. The warning spell burns. Not the gentle pulse of a scrape or bruiser. Loki has grown accustomed to those with Draco's morning sparring sessions. This is different, sharper, the specific signature of bone breaking. Loki is on his feet before he consciously registers the pain. He's in the middle of reviewing documents for Thor's upcoming coronation task he's been dreading, but all of that falls away. His son is hurt. He reaches Heimdall in minutes. Tell me, he demands. Heimdall's golden eyes are distant, seeing across realms. A mountain troll breached the school. Your son faced it along with the Potter boy and a mortal girl. A pause. They have bested the creature. The little prince's left arm is broken, but he is otherwise unharmed. He's being taken to the healing ward now. Relief and fury war in Loki's chest. Atral, at Hogwarts. How? That is unclear. The creature was released into the school, it seems, by the defense professor. Loki's eyes narrow. Quirrell. Loki turns toward the Bifrost. Open it. I am going to Hogwarts. Loki materializes in the corridor outside the hospital wing, not caring about the gasps from nearby portraits. He can feel Draco's presence near Beelive, awake, in some pain but not critically injured. He pushes through the doors. Draco is sitting up in a bed, his left arm in a sling, looking thoroughly annoyed at being confined. Harry is in a chair beside him, and a bushy-haired girl Loki doesn't recognize is perched on the edge of the mattress, apparently in the middle of lecturing them both about safety protocols. Could have been killed. Honestly, what were you thinking? Fathia. Draco's face lights up. He tries to rise, winces, and settles for reaching out with his good arm. Loki crosses the room in 3 strides and gathers his son into an embrace, careful of the injured arm. Little dragon, he murmurs against Draco's hair, you frighten me. I'm fine, it's just a broken arm. Madame Pomfrey said it'll be healed by morning. You fought a mountain troll. And one. Draco pulls back, grinning despite everything. Harry dropped its own club on its head. And I transfigured a sword out of bathroom debris. It was brilliant. Loki looks at his sun-bruised, broken arm, covered in troll stench and toilet water, beaming with pride, and feels his heart clench with something between terror and fierce love. It was reckless, he says. It was necessary. Hermione was in danger. Loki glances at the bushy-haired girl, who has gone very quiet and is staring at him with wide eyes. You are the one they rescued. Why, yes, Sir Hermione Granger. She straightens her spine despite her obvious nerves. Your son was very brave. They both were. Loki studies her for a moment, then nods. Miss Granger, you seem intelligent. Perhaps you can help ensure my son does not throw himself at any more trolls in the future. Roman too can try, sir. See that you do. Loki turns to Harry, who has been watching the reunion with a carefully neutral expression. And Harry, I trust you are unharmed. Harry nods quickly. Yes, sir. Something flickers in Loki's expression, approval perhaps. Good, you fought well tonight, both of you. His gaze shifts toward the door, and his voice takes on a harder edge. Now, if you will excuse, may have questions for your headmaster about how a mountain troll came to be wandering the corridors of a school. The stone gargoyle moves aside without Loki speaking a password. His magic presses against it with enough force that it simply doesn't dare refuse. The spiral staircase carries him upward. Dumbledore is waiting for him, seated behind his desk with an air of calm that does not quite reach his eyes. Jarl Odinson, I had wondered when you might visit. I had intended to come sooner. Loki does not take the offered seat. He prefers to stand, to look down at this old wizard who has been playing games with children's lives. Other matters delayed me. I shall not make that mistake again. The boys are. My son has a broken arm, caused by a mountain troll that was released into the corridors of your school while children feasted unaware. Loki lets his voice carry the full weight of his displeasure. Explain. Dumbledore finally turns. His eyes, usually twinkling with some private amusement, are shadowed. A regrettable security breach. Professor Quirrell discovered the creature in the dungeons and came to warn us. Quirrell. The name tastes wrong on Loki's tongue. He has felt the corruption around that man since the moment he set foot in the castle, a wrongness that reminded him of rot, of something parasitic. Your defense professor released the creature deliberately. Did you think I would send my son to a school I did not watch? Dumbledore's expression barely shifts, but Loki has spent centuries reading faces far more guarded than this. The old wizard is not surprised. He is merely surprised that Loki knows. If what you say is true, it is not a matter of if. Loki begins to pace. He released a troll into a school full of children, and you, the great Albus Dumbledore, headmaster and protector of the young, had no idea. I had suspicions about Quirrell. Dumbledore's voice is heavy. But nothing concrete. Suspicions, and yet you allowed him to teach, to walk these halls, to endanger. Loki stops pacing. And speaking of other dangers you have neglected to mention, is there a Cerberus in the third-floor corridor? Dumbledore's eyes widen slightly. How did you? I wove enchantments into the very stones of this castle 1,000 years ago. Spells to protect, to warn, to watch. Loki's smile is thin and cold. When I arrived tonight, every ward I placed sang to me of the threats within these walls. The troll. The corruption festering in your defense, Professor. And a three-headed beast guarding something in a corridor that children can access with a simple unlocking charm. Dumbledore's expression shifts. The third-floor corridor was declared off-limits to children. Forbidden fruit is the sweetest, Dumbledore. Surely you know this. A declared prohibition is practically an invitation to the curious. Loki's voice drips with contempt. What are you protecting? What could possibly be worth risking students' lives? A long silence stretches between them. I cannot tell you that, Dumbledore says finally. Cannot or will not. Both. Loki studies the old wizard for a long moment. Then he smiles, and it is not a kind expression. You truly do not see it, do you? Or do you see and choose to ignore? He begins to pace, his agitation bleeding through his usual composure. I have been patient with you, Dumbledore. I have allowed my son to attend your institution despite my reservations. I have extended my protection to Harry Potter because he is dear to Draco. But the children are unharmed, Dumbledore interjects gently. By fortune and their own skill, not by any protection you provided, Loki rounds on him. Those enchantments I spoke of, ones that told me of every threat within these walls. Do you know what I found when I examined them tonight? Dumbledore's silence is answer enough. They are in tatters, Loki continues, his voice dropping to something dangerous. Ripped and torn, particularly around the defense classroom, something has been feeding on them. Something hungry and parasitic has been leeching the magic I wove into this school, and you have been blind to it. These are serious accusations, Jarl Odinson. They are serious facts. Loki stops pacing. His eyes meet Dumbledore's, and for a moment the headmaster sees something ancient looking back at him. I can smell the rot of your defense, Professor, from here. You have allowed the wraith of Tom Riddle to walk your halls, to teach your students, to corrupt everything it touches, and for what? Dumbledore's face goes very still. Do not insult me by pretending ignorance, Loki says softly. You suspected. That is why you brought the sorcerer's stone here. You were using it as bait. The silence stretches. You have turned this place of learning into a battleground, Loki continues. You have endangered hundreds of children, including mine, in your scheme to confirm your suspicions about Riddle's survival. Were you planning to let a student face him? Were you hoping Thackeray would be the one to stumble upon your trap? Dumbledore's expression flickers, just for a moment, but it is enough. Loki feels something cold settle in his chest. You were. You actually intended for that child to face a dark wizard who terrorized your entire nation. There is a prophecy. There is always a prophecy. Loki's voice rises, and the very air in the room seems to vibrate with power. You mortals and your obsession with fate. Prophecies are fueled by belief and shaped by choice. A prophecy is not a command, Dumbledore. It is a possibility among infinite possibilities, given weight only by the belief of those who hear it. And you would sacrifice a child on its altar. Harry is the only one who can. Harry is 11 years old. Loki takes a step closer, and Dumbledore, to his credit, does not retreat. Whatever role you imagine for him, whatever destiny you believe he must fulfill, he isn't a weapon to wield. He is a boy who likes potions and misses his parents, and has finally found a friend and a place where he feels he belongs. And you would use him as a weapon in a war you are too afraid to fight yourself. I have fought. You defeated Grindelwald when you had no other choice. And even then you came tome for aid. Loki's smile is sharp. Oh yes, I remember our second meeting. You sought me out, desperate for any advantage against your former friend. I told you then that your realm must handle its own affairs, and I tell you the same now. But I will not allow you to sacrifice children in the process. He turns toward the door. Jarl Odinson, I am going to deal with Quirrell, Loki says without looking back. When I am finished, you will need a new defense against the dark arts professor. I suggest you advertise the position as soon as possible. He's almost to the door when Dumbledore speaks again. The boys, they fought a mountain troll and won. That is remarkable for first years. Loki pauses. They are remarkable children. See that you remember that, Dumbledore. They are not pawns to be moved about your board. They are not weapons to be honed for your conflicts. They are children, and they are mine. I will not warn you again. The defense classroom is dark when Loki enters. He does not bother with lights. His eyes adjust easily to the shadows, and Basaidish wants to see exactly how deeply the corruption has spread. The answer is everywhere. The walls seem to pulse with wrongness. The desks are covered in a fine layer of something that feels like despair made physical. The very air tastes of decay. Quirrell is in his private quarters, just beyond the classroom. Loki can sense him there, or rather, he can sense the thing that has attached itself to Quirrell like a leech. The door opens at his touch. The defense professor is sitting in a chair, facing away from the entrance. His ridiculous turban is gone, and in the dim light, Loki can see what has been hidden beneath it. A face, grey and terrible, with red eyes that gleam with malevolent intelligence. It is pressed against the back of Quirrell's skull like a parasite, and when it sees Loki, it smiles. Ah, says a voice that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere. A visitor. Quirrell did not mention we were expecting company. Tom Riddle. Loki says the name like a curse. Or do you prefer Voldemort? I confess I have always found the name rather theatrical. Quirrell's body jerks, turning so that the face on the back of his head can look at Loki directly. The red eyes narrow with suspicion. You know me, yet I do not know you. The voice is cold, probing. Who are you, wizard, to speak my name so carelessly? I am the father of one of the children you endangered tonight. Loki begins to walk closer, slow and deliberate. That is all you need to know. The thing that was Voldemort studies him, and Loki can feel it trying to press against his mind-searching, grasping, attempting to read him through Quirrell's borrowed eyes. But Loki's mental shields have been honed over centuries, and this half-dead thing, for all its malice, is no match for them. You have some skill in occlumency, Voldemort observes, a note of reluctant interest in his voice. But skill will not save you. I am Lord Voldemort. I am a fragment. Loki's voice cuts through the posturing. A piece of something that was once a man, now barely more than vapor and malice. You have been feeding on this poor fool's life force to sustain yourself, corrupting everything around you, including magic, woven into these stones long before your grandmother's grandmother drew breath. And you have been doing so in a school that houses my son. Something flickers in those red eyes. Uncertainty, perhaps. This is not how victims usually respond. Quirrell's wand rises, but Loki flicks his wrist, and it flies from the man's trembling fingers. You cannot kill me, Voldemort rasps, recovering his composure. I have ensured my immortality. Whatever you do to this body, I will endure. Loki studies the creature with clinical interest. The words ring with certainty, not bluster, but genuine belief. And indeed, now that he looks more closely, Loki can sense something unusual about the nature of this being. It is not simply a ghost or a shade. There is something anchoring it, tethering it to existence in a way that feels fundamentally wrong. Soul magic, perhaps. Something has been done to bind this essence to the mortal plane. Loki files the observation away for later consideration. Whatever you have done to yourself, I intend to unravel it eventually, Loki says. But first I am going to remove you from this school. He reaches out with his Sather, wrapping it around the corruption that binds Voldemort to Quirrell. It is like handling something rotten, slick and wrong and trying to bite back. But Loki has dealt with far worse than this. He has faced the darkness between realms. He has walked the paths that no sane being would tread. This wraith is nothing. With a single, savage twist of power, he tears Voldemort free. Quirrell screams a horrible, gurgling sound and collapses. He is dead before he hits the ground, his body too damaged by years of parasitic possession to survive the separation. The wraith of Voldemort hovers in the air, a formless mass of darkness and rage. Loki moves to contain it, to bind it, but the thing is faster than he anticipated. It does not fight. It flees, hurling itself at the walls with desperate, mindless fury. And where Loki's ancient wards should have held firm, they do not. The wraith has been feeding on them for months, weakening them, creating gaps that Loki has not yet had time to repair. It finds one of those gaps and tears through. Loki snarls in frustration, reaching after it, but the wraith is already gone, slipping through the crack in the wards and vanishing into the night like smoke through a broken window. He stands alone in the ruined quarters, Quirrell's body cooling at his feet, and allows himself a moment of cold fury. The creature has escaped, wounded, diminished, but not destroyed. Next time, Loki thinks, next time I will be prepared. He will need to speak with an old friend. The Ancient One has always had a better understanding of soul magic than he does, and he suspects he will need that knowledge before this matter is truly resolved. But for now, there is work to be done, wards to repair, children to protect. He will not make the mistake of leaving them unguarded again. Draco's arm is fully healed by breakfast, just as Madame Pomfrey promised. The hospital wing releases him with strict instructions to avoid fighting any more trolls, which he chooses to interpret as a suggestion rather than a command. The Slytherin common room is buzzing with rumors when he returns. Professor Quirrell Iskan, not just absent, disappeared entirely. His quarters were found empty this morning, the door hanging open, and no one knows where he went or why. I heard he ran off in the night, Pansy Parkinson is saying to anyone who will listen. Just packed his bags and fled. My father says he always knew there was something wrong with that man. I heard he had a nervous breakdown after the troll, Millicent Bulstrode offers. Couldn't handle the stress. Draco knows better. His father had that particular look in his eye when he left last night, one that meant someone was about to have a very, very bad evening. Defense against the dark arts is cancelled until further notice, Blaze reports, sliding into the seat next to Draco at the breakfast table. There's going to be an announcement about finding a replacement. Hermione appears at the end of the Slytherin table, ignoring the disapproving looks from other students. A Gryffindor at the snake table is practically scandalous, but she doesn't seem to care. "How's your arm?" she asks, settling onto the bench across from them. Good as new, Draco flexes his fingers to demonstrate. Magical healing is quite efficient. I've been reading about it. The bone-mending charms are fascinating from a theoretical perspective, but the practical applications, she catches herself, cheeks flushing. Sorry, I ramble when I'm nervous. Don't apologize, Draco grins. I like rambling. I do it all the time. Harry says it's one of my more endearing qualities. I definitely did not say that, Harry mutters. You implied it. Hermione laughs, and something in her expression relaxes. So, are we friends now? I know it's probably complicated with the house rivalries and everything. House rivalries are stupid, Draco says firmly. Arbitrary divisions meant to encourage competition over cooperation. Very short-sighted, really. The whole system could use a redesign. That's not what most Slytherins say. I'm not most Slytherins. Draco reaches across the table and offers his hand. Friends, Hermione takes it, her smile bright and genuine. Friends. Harry looks between them with fond resignation. I'm going to regret this, aren't I? Almost certainly, Draco agrees cheerfully. The weeks after Halloween settle into a new rhythm. Defense against the dark arts remains cancelled, which means they have a free period every day. Draco insists they use this time for supplementary training, dragging Harry to an unused classroom he's discovered on the 7th floor. The room is strangely accommodating. It always seems to have exactly what they need for practice. Hermione joins them sometimes, though she's more interested in the theoretical aspects than the physical training. She and Draco can debate magical theory for hours. Harry has started bringing a book to read while they argue. The prank war with the Weasley twins continues, though there's an unspoken pause after Halloween. Even Fred and George seem to recognize that something significant happened that night, even if they don't know the details. The first Quidditch match of the season is Slytherin versus Gryffindor. Slytherin wins, but only barely. If Gryffindor had a decent seeker, we would have lost, Draco declares that evening in the common room. Their second-year chaser, Katie Bell, she nearly broke through our defense 3 times. Flint's strategy is all power, no finesse. We should try out next year, Harry. December arrives with snow and cold and the promise of the winter holiday. The letter arrives at breakfast, carried by a raven rather than an owl. Draco recognizes the bird. Immediately it's one of the estate's messengers, enchanted for speed and discretion. He tears the letter open eagerly. Little dragon, I must call you back to Asgard for the first portion of the winter holiday. There are matters here that require my attention, preparations for your uncle's coronation that cannot be delayed, and I would have you by my side. We shall return to Midgard before the Yule celebration to collect Harry and bring him to the estate for the remainder of the break. I have already spoken with your headmaster. You will depart with me this evening. Your father Draco reads the letter twice, his emotions warring. Excitement at seeing his father, at returning to Asgard even briefly, but also disappointment at leaving Harry behind. What is it? Harry asks, noticing his expression. I have to go to Asgard for a few days. Draco uses the cover story they've established, Asgard, as the family estate in Norway. Family matters, preparations for my uncle's event. My father will come for me tonight. Harry's face falls slightly before he schools his expression. Oh, that's fine. I signed up to stay at Hogwarts anyway. Draco hears what Harry doesn't say. I'm used to being left behind. It's only for a few days, Draco says firmly. Then we're coming back for you. You're spending Yule at the estate with us. My father's already arranged it. He has, of course. You didn't think we'd leave you here alone for the entire holiday, did you? Harry doesn't answer, which is answer enough. Draco grips his friend's shoulder. You're my shield brother, Harry. Family. A few days, that's all. Then we'll come for you. Harry's smile is small but genuine. Okay. I can handle a few days. That's the spirit. Besides, the castle will be practically empty. You'll have the run of the place. Think of the mischief you could get into. Harry laughs, and some of the tension leaves his shoulders. I think I'll just catch up on some reading. Boring, Draco declares. But suit yourself. Harry can't sleep. The castle is too quiet with most of the students gone. The Slytherin common room feels empty without Draco's constant energy, and even Yer seems subdued, curling tighter around Harry's wrist for warmth. Finally, frustrated with his racing thoughts, he throws off his covers and decides to take a walk. The castle is different at night. Shadows pool in corners, and the portraits murmur in their sleep. Harry moves quietly, instinctively avoiding the paths where Filch usually patrols. He doesn't know what draws him to the particular classroom. He finds perhaps it's the thin sliver of light under the door, or perhaps it's something else entirely. But when he pushes the door open, he finds an empty room with nothing in it but a magnificent mirror. The mirror is as tall as the ceiling, with an ornate gold frame and clawed feet. Words are carved around the top, erest stra eruoit ube cafruoit on wosi. Harry approaches slowly. He's not sure what he expects to see his reflection, probably pale and tired and alone. What he sees instead takes his breath away. His mother, his father, standing behind him in the mirror, smiling down at him with love in their eyes. His mother has red hair and green eyes. He realizes with a jolt, and his father looks just like him, messy dark hair and glasses and all. Harry reaches out to touch the glass, but there's nothing there, just cold, smooth mirror. He doesn't know how long he stands there, staring at the family he never knew. It could be minutes or hours. The ache in his chest is so deep it feels like drowning. I see you have found the mirror of Erest. Harry spins. Dumbledore stands in the doorway, looking ancient and kind in his nightrobes. The old wizard explains about the mirror, how it shows the deepest desire of the heart, how men have wasted away before it. He tells Harry that the mirror will be moved, that he shouldn't go looking for it again. It does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live, Harry. Yes, sir. Dumbledore seems to hesitate, then reaches into his robes and pulls out a shimmering cloak. I believe this belonged to your father. It was left in my care many years ago to be returned to you when you came to Hogwarts. I had intended to give it to you at Christmas, but perhaps you should have it now. Harry takes the cloak with trembling hands. It feels like water between his fingers. An invisibility cloak, Dumbledore explains. Your father used it for, well, rather a lot of rule-breaking, if I recall correctly. Use it wisely. Thank you, sir. Dumbledore nods and turns to leave. At the doorway, he pauses. I knew your parents, Harry. They were remarkable people. And they loved you very, very much. He smiles sadly. Happy Christmas. Then he is gone, and Harry is alone with a mirror full of ghosts and a cloak that belonged to a father he never knew. 3 more days until Draco and Loki return. He can wait. Draco and Loki arrive in the early evening. Harry doesn't know exactly how they get into the Castiglione moment he's sitting alone in the common room. The next, there's a familiar knock on the entrance and Draco is tumbling through, grinning widely, talking a mile a minute about how boring the diplomatic functions were, but how he hopes that Harry can come to Asgard someday, because the libraries are incredible. Behind Draco, Loki stands in the corridor, tall and elegant, watching their reunion with something soft in his expression. Ready to go, Harry? Draco asks, practically bouncing. We've got so much planned. Yule at the estate is amazing, and Father said we can practice combat forms in the training room, and there's going to be a feast that's actually a feast. Harry laughs, something warm spreading through his chest. Let me grab my trunk. He's packed and ready in minutes. Yer settles happily in his sleeve, pleased to be going somewhere warmer than the dungeons. As they leave the castle, Loki falls into step beside Harry while Draco chatters ahead of them. Did you have an eventful few days? Loki asks, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. Harry thinks about the mirror of Erest, about seeing his parents for the first time, about the invisibility cloak that still feels like a gift and a grief all at once. I found a mirror, he says quietly. It showed me my parents. Loki is silent for a moment. Then, the mirror of Erest. Yes, I know of it, a dangerous artifact in its way. Dumbledore said it shows what you most desire. Indeed it does, and desire unchecked can become a prison. Loki glances down at him. but sometimes it can also be a compass. What we yearn for tells us much about who we are. Harry considers this. What would you see in it? Loki's expression flicker something too fast to read. I try not to dwell on such questions. I have what matters most to me already. His gaze moves to Draco, who has stopped ahead to exclaim over something, probably a particularly interesting-looking snowdrift. What more could I desire? It's not really an answer, but Harry finds he doesn't mind. They catch up to Draco, and Loki opens a shimmering portal that leads to warmth and light and the promise of Yule celebrations. Harry steps through. For the first time in his life, he's going somewhere he's wanted for Christmas. Chapter 19. The Odinson estate is unlike anything Harry has ever seen. He's been here before, of course at that magical month before Hogwarts that felt like stepping into a dream. But arriving now, in the depths of winter with snow blanketing the grounds and warm lights spilling from every window, it feels different somehow. More real, more like coming home. Darby appears the moment they cross the threshold, practically vibrating with excitement. Young Princeling is home. And Mr. Harry Potter too. The house elf's enormous eyes are bright with tears of joy. Darby has been preparing for days. Thank you, Darby, Draco says warmly, allowing the elf to take his traveling cloak. It is so good to see the young masters back home, the elf sniffles. Hogwarts elves are not knowing how to properly care for young masters. Darby has to be teaching them so many things. Harry smiles as Darby fusses over them. The other elvish Usvitir, Draco, calls them take their trunks upstairs without a word. The Husvitir are different from the elves Harry has seen at Hogwarts. They move with quiet confidence, wearing actual clothes instead of pillowcases, and seem genuinely happy as they go about their tasks rather than frantically eager to please. Harry, Loki's voice draws his attention. A word, if you please. There's something serious in Loki's tone that makes Harry's stomach flutter with nerves. He follows Loki into a study lined with books where a fire crackles pleasantly in the hearth. Please, sit. Harry perches on the edge of a comfortable chair, trying not to fidget. His thumb finds the leather band around his left wrist, one Loki gave him before Hogwarts, and traces the runes pressed into the leather. The familiar gesture steadies him. Loki is quiet for a long moment, his gaze steady on Harry, as if reading something written in the spaces between the boy's careful stillness. When he speaks, his voice is measured but warm. I have had my attorneys looking into your situation, Harry. The way you were placed with the Dursleys, the lack of any proper oversight. He pauses, and Harry watches something sharp flicker behind his eyes. It was badly handled, worse than badly handled. Harry's heart stutters. What do you mean? My attorneys made contact with a solicitor your parents had consulted before their deaths. Unfortunately, they only had an initial meeting. Nothing was ever formalized or made legally binding. Loki's expression is careful, but not pitying. Harry is grateful for that. However, because an investigation was opened into your parents' wishes, that solicitor's privileged notes became relevant evidence. Combined with my affidavit documenting what I observed regarding your treatment at the Dursleys. He lets the sentence hang, and Harry fills in the pieces himself. Documentation, evidence, a case built brick by brick. The Wisengamot ruled in our favor, Loki continues. I have been granted full magical guardianship over you. You are now legally and officially my ward. Harry stares at him. The words don't quite make sense at first. They are too enormous to fit inside the tight space in his chest where he's learned to keep his expectations small. Your ward, he repeats slowly. That means you belong here. Loki's voice carries no qualification, nounless or however. The Dursleys have no claim on you, no legal right to contact you, retrieve you, or interfere in your life in any way. That chapter is closed, Harry, permanently. Harry looks down at his hands, pressing his palms against his knees to stop them from shaking. He doesn't know what to do with the sudden absence of a fear he's carried for so long. It had become part of the architecture of his thoughts. Every summer, every holiday, every time he wondered if this would be the time they finally did something he couldn't recover from gone. He takes a breath, then another. When he speaks, his voice is carefully controlled. Thank you for handling all of that. I know it must have been complicated. Loki regards him with that unsettling perceptiveness, the look that makes Harry feel like his carefully constructed walls are made of glass. You are allowed to feel relieved, Harry. You are allowed to feel anything about this. You needn't package it up neatly for my benefit. Harry's jaw tightens. There is more, Loki continues, giving Harry the mercy of moving forward. In reviewing your parents' consultation notes, the solicitor found reference to a named godfather. Someone your parents intended to take custody of you, Harry's breath catches. A godfather? Yes, his name is Sirius Black. The name means nothing to Harry, and yet it feels like it should. A godfather. Someone his parent chose. Someone who was supposed to want him before he could do anything to earn it. Why didn't he? The question escapes before Harry can stop it, and he hates the way his voice sounds small and childish and wanting. Take care of me, I mean. Did he not? He can't finish the sentence. Did he not want me either? Something shifts in Loki's expression. Not pitiful that, but a kind of fierce recognition. He seems to weigh his next words carefully. What I am about to tell you will be difficult to hear. But I have never believed in shielding children from hard truths, only in giving them the support to face those truths. He pauses. Sirius Black is in Azkaban. He has been imprisoned there since just after your parents' deaths. Harry feels the blood drain from his face. Imprisoned. For what? The official record states that he betrayed your parents' location to Voldemort, that he was their secret keeper and gave them up, and that when confronted by another wizard, a man named Peter Pettigrewblack killed him along with 13 muggles in the street. The words land like blows, each one harder than the last. Harry's godfather, the man his parents chose, a traitor, a murderer. So Harry's voice is barely a whisper, he's the reason they're dead. That is what the official record states, Loki repeats, and there's a deliberate weight to the repetition. However, the more my attorneys investigate, the more irregular the circumstances appear. He leans forward slightly. There was no trial, Harry, no formal proceedings, no presentation of evidence, no opportunity for defense. He was simply put away. Harry's mind latches onto the inconsistency like a thread to pull. How can someone be imprisoned for murder without a trial? An excellent question. One that no one in authority seems eager to answer. Loki's eyes glitter with something cold and sharp, not directed at Harry, but at whoever allowed such a thing to happen. I want to be clear with you. I do not know if Sirius Black is guilty or innocent. The evidence I've seen thus far is incomplete, contradictory in places. There are layers here that do not add up, and I have learned to be deeply suspicious of things that do not add up. Harry thinks of the way the Dursleys' story about his parents never quite made sense, about the cupboard and the lies and all the small cruelties dressed up as normalcy. He understands, perhaps better than Loki realizes, what it means when the official story doesn't match the evidence. You're going to find out what really happened, Harry says. It's not a question. I am. I do not intend to leave any stone unturned. Loki holds his gaze steadily. But I did not tell you this to give you false hope. I told you because you deserve to know what is being done on your behalf, and because, he pauses, something almost gentle entering his voice. Because the most pressing matter has already been resolved. You have a home here, Harry. You have legal protection, stability, people who will fight for you. Whatever the truth about Sirius Black turns out to be, whether he is a monster or a victim or something in between, that will not change. Harry absorbs this slowly. The ground beneath his feet feels more solid than it ever has, and maybe that's why the uncertainty about his godfather doesn't send him spiraling the way it might have before. There's something to stand on now, something that won't shift. If he's innocent, Harry says quietly, he's been in Azkaban for my whole life, for something he didn't do. Yes, Loki's voice is gentle. And if that is the case, I will ensure it is corrected. But if he is guilty, he lets the sentence hang. Then at least I'll know the truth. Harry meets his eyes. I'd rather know, even if it's bad. Something like approval flickers across Loki's face. I thought you might say that. He rises smoothly and rests a hand on Harry's shoulder brief, grounding, asking nothing in return. You need not decide how to feel about any of this today. Simply know that your future is no longer in question. Only the past remains to be untangled. Harry nods, not entirely trusting his voice. His throat feels too tight, and there's a burning behind his eyes that he refuses to acknowledge. No one's ever, he stops, swallows, tries again. I'm not used to people fighting for me when I haven't done anything to earn it. I know. There's no judgment in Loki's voice, only understanding. That is something we will work on unlearning. He squeezes Harry's shoulder once before letting go. Now, I believe Draco is eager to show you the Yule preparations. The Husvitir have been decorating for days, and I am told there has been quite the debate over color schemes. Harry manages a small, genuine smile at that, swiping quickly at his eyes as he stands. He has questioned so many questions about Sirius Black and his parents and what really happened all those years ago. But for now, there's something almost more important than answers. The ground is solid. The door is closed. And someone is willing to dig for the truth simply because Harry deserves to know it. For a boy who has spent his whole life trying to earn the right to take up space, that is no small thing. Draco takes in the lively Yule decorations. Evergreen boughs hang from the rafters, woven through with golden lights that flicker like captured starfire. A massive Yule log burns in the fireplace, its flames dancing in shades of green and gold from the enchanted wood. The long table is laid with a feast that actually deserves the name-roasted meats and honeyed vegetables and bread still warm from the ovens, with mead and cider and his beloved Ulfheim tea. This is amazing, Harry breathes, staring at the spread with wide eyes. This is Apripur feast, Draco declares with satisfaction. In Asgard, feasts last for days, the storytelling and singing and contests of strength. My uncle once ate an entire boar by himself. Your uncle sounds impressive. He's very large, Draco grins, and very loud. You'll meet him someday. They settle into chairs near the fire, plates piled high. Fadir joins them shortly, looking more relaxed than Draco has seen him in weeks. Before we eat, Fadir says, there is a Yule tradition to observe. He waves his hand, and 3 wrapped packages appear on the table before them. Harry looks startled. Draco just grins, already reaching for the one nearest him. Presents first, then feasting, Draco explains. It's tradition, Harry hesitates. I made something, but I don't know if it's good enough. A gift is a gift, Fadir says gently. There is no good enough. Me first. Draco grabs the packages he prepared. Harry, this one's for you. Harry unwraps it carefully, so different from Draco's enthusiastic Terringand his breath catches. Inside is a braided leather cord, similar in style to the band already around Harry's wrist, but meant to be worn as a necklace. Woven into the braid are small silver beads etched with runes. I made it myself, Draco says, suddenly nervous. Well, grandmother helped with the metalwork, but I did the braiding and chose the runes. They're for protection and, he hesitates, and kinship. Shield brothers are supposed to exchange tokens. I know we already did the oath, but I wanted you to have something physical, something that shows you're part of my family now. Harry stares at the necklace for a long moment, his throat working. When he looks up, his green eyes are suspiciously bright. Draco, this is. I've never. If you cry, I'm taking it back, Draco says, though his own voice is a bit thick. Harry laughs wetly and immediately puts the necklace on, tucking it under his shirt where it rests against his chest. I'm not crying, there's just dust in my eyes. Obviously. Draco turns to Fadir next, more nervous still. He's been working on this gift for months. This one's for you, Fadir. Fadir accepts the package with a curious expression. When he opens it, something shifts in his face, something soft and surprised that Draco rarely sees. Inside is a small journal, bound in dark green leather. The cover is embossed with an intricate design. two serpents intertwined around a tree, with ravens perched in the branches. But it's not the journal itself that makes Father Possates what's inside. I've been writing down everything, Draco explains quickly. All the stories you've told me. About Asgard, about grandmother and grandfather, about Uncle Thor and the Warriors 3. The tales from when you were young. I didn't want to forget any of them, and I thought maybe someday, if I have children, I could read them these stories too, so they know where they come from. Father pages through the journal carefully, and Draco has to stop himself from filling the silence with explanations. Little dragon, Father says quietly, and his voice sounds strange. This is. I know my handwriting isn't very good yet, Draco rushes to add. And I probably got some details wrong. It is perfect. Father closes the journal and looks at his son with an expression that makes Draco's chest feel too full. You have given me something far more valuable than you know. Draco ducks his head, embarrassed and pleased. It's just stories. Stories are how we remember who we are. Father sets the journal aside carefully, reverently almost. Thank you, Draco. Now it's Father's turn. He gestures, and packages appear before both boys. Draco tears into his with enthusiasm. Inside is a new set of throwing knives, perfectly balanced, wickedly sharp, and engraved with protective runes. Father, these are beautiful. I heard yours bounced off the troll rather embarrassingly, Father says dryly. These are enchanted to pierce magical hide. They should serve you better in future encounters. Harry opens his package next. Inside is a slim dagger, its blade gleaming with an almost liquid quality, the handle wrapped in dark leather. Every warrior should have a blade, Father explains. This one is enchanted to return to your hand when called. Focus your intent and it will come. Harry runs his fingers along the flat of the blade. I've never had a weapon before. He shakes his head slightly. Thank you, it's beautiful. Now you, Harry, Draco prompts. What did you make? Harry reaches into his pocket and pulls out two small vials, looking embarrassed. They're enhanced healing potions. I modified the standard recipe based on some notes I found in the library. They should work faster and on more serious injuries. He hands one to Draco and one to Father. I know it's not much compared to, not much. Draco examines the vial with interest. Harry, if this works the way you're describing, it's worth its weight in gold. You improved the recipe, Harry flushes. I like potions. You are remarkably talented, Father agrees, holding his vial up to the light. I shall keep this close. Besides, Draco adds, tucking his vial into his pocket, you gave me something I can use to save my own life. That's not much, Harry. That's everything. Harry's flush deepens, but he's smiling a real smile, not the careful ones he usually wears. They eat after that, and Draco tells stories while Harry listens with rapt attention, and Father interjects occasionally with corrections or additional details. It's the best evening Draco can remember having in a very long time. Later that evening, the astral plane shimmers into focus around Loki, its familiar golden light, a welcome respite from the weight of physical form. He finds himself standing in the courtyard of Camotage as it exists in this liminal space of stone pathways gleaming with an otherworldly luminescence, the mountains beyond rendered in strokes of amber and violet. She is already waiting for him. Urgudile, Loki greets, inclining his head. The Ancient One turns, her ageless face breaking into a warm smile. You are the only one who still calls me that, you know. I knew you before you were the Ancient One. Loki allows himself a small smile in return. I knew you when you were a stubborn acolyte who refused to accept that sling ring travel had limitations. And I knew you when you were a prince who thought he could impress mortals with parlor tricks. Her eyes crinkle with amusement. We have both grown since then. It has been. Loki calculates briefly. Nearly 5 centuries since he first encountered the young Celtic woman with fire in her eyes and an inexhaustible hunger for knowledge. She had been barely 2 decades into her training when their paths crossed, a bored immortal seeking diversion on Midgard. She, a novice determined to prove herself worthy of the mystic arts. He had found her persistence amusing at first, then admirable, and finally worthy of genuine respect. Now she leads the masters of the mystic arts, guardian of this realm against threats from beyond the dimensional veil. It is a position she has held for longer than most mortal lifetimes, and one she carries with a grace that reminds Loki unexpectedly of his mother. "You seem lighter than the last time we spoke," she observes, gesturing for him to walk with her through the golden courtyard. Something has changed. Loki cannot entirely suppress the warmth that rises in his chest. "I have a son now." The Ancient One's eyebrows lift with genuine surprise. A son, the prince who swore he would never be burdened with the complications of progeny. The Norns have a sense of humor. Loki's voice softens in a way that would mortify him if anyone else were present. His name is Draco. He is remarkable. Tell me. It is not a request Loki would normally honor, guards his vulnerabilities jealously, and Draco is the greatest of them, but Urgudile has earned his trust over centuries. And there is, perhaps, a small part of him that simply wishes to speak of his son to someone who will understand. "He is the child of my magic," Loki begins. "Born of a ritual gone wronger, perhaps gone exactly right, depending on one's perspective. His Sather is so like my own that teaching him has been like watching echoes of my own childhood, and yet he is entirely his own person. What is he like? Bright, curious, frustratingly optimistic in a way I have never managed to be." Loki's lips curve. "He took to shapeshifting before he was Sevena's skill that took me twice as long to master at his age. Though his forms tend toward albino colorings, which is utterly impractical but terribly endearing. A white raven, of all things. I had to suggest he try a dove instead." The Ancient One laughs softly. "He sounds like quite the prodigy." He is. There is no false modesty in Loki's voice. His illusion work rivals my own at that age. His grasp of magical theory is exceptional. Pride suffuses his tone despite his efforts at restraint. He is everything I could have hoped for, more than I deserve, certainly. The Ancient One studies him with those knowing eyes. And there is another I sense. "Your threads are woven with more than one young life." Loki inclines his head, acknowledging her perceptiveness. "Harry, he is Draco's shield brother, a bond they forged themselves within hours of meeting. I have taken him as my ward. The Potter child." Interest sharpens her gaze. "The one who survived the killing curse." "The same, though he is far more than that singular moment of survival." Loki's expression grows thoughtful. "He has a quick mind and a fierce heart. His loyalty is absolute once given. And he has spent his entire life being told he was worthless by people who should have protected him, yet somehow retained his capacity for kindness." A thread of anger weaves through his voice. "He and Draco fought that troll together." Harry had known him barely 2 months, but he stood at Draco's side without hesitation. "They sound well matched." "They are." Harry grounds Draco's occasional flights of fancy, and Draco draws Harry out of his shell. "It is," Loki pauses, searching for the right word, "fortuitous. For both of them." The Ancient One is quiet for a moment, and Loki senses she is seeing more than he has said, reading the threads of connection and care that bind him to these two mortal children. "You did not reach out merely to share good news," she says finally. "Your threads are troubled beneath the joy. What has happened?" The shift from proud father to concerned guardian is seamless. "I encountered something at Hogwarts, something I was unable to capture or contain." "The School of the Four." Interest sharpens her gaze. "I thought your wards there were impenetrable." "As did I," the admission grates. "A dark wizard, the one who murdered Harry's parent, had somehow infiltrated the castle. He was possessing one of the professors, feeding off him like a parasite. When I confronted him and destroyed the host body, what remained?" Loki pauses, searching for the right words. "It was not a ghost, not a poltergeist, not any form of spectral remnant I have encountered before." "Describe it." "A wraith of sorts. A mass of malevolent consciousness without form or substance, yet still capable of independent action. It fled from me with purpose, with intent. There was barely anything human left in it. The mind was fractured, degraded almost beyond recognition, and yet it persisted. Loki's jaw tightens. Something is tethering it to this plane, some enchantment I could not identify. The Ancient One is quiet for a long moment, her expression growing distant in that way it does when she is consulting knowledge that spans dimensions. "This wraith," she says slowly. "When you struck it, did it fragment further, or did it remain cohesive?" Cohesive. Disturbingly so, as if the damage to its consciousness was old, long since stabilized into its current state of madness. Loki considers. Mostly reactive, like a wounded animal, though there were brief flashes of rationality. It wanted something in the Caslia stone, hidden behind protections. When I destroyed its access to that goal, even those moments of clarity ceased. And this wraith has persisted for a decade. Without a body, without a vessel, without any apparent source of sustenance. Yes, Loki meets her eyes. That is what troubles me most. Such persistence requires an anchor, a powerful one. She nods slowly. The level of mental degradation you describeth, fracturing of consciousness, the erosion of rational thought while base instincts remain. I have seen this pattern before, though rarely. It is the signature of repeated trauma to the soul itself. Her voice grows grave. Not trauma inflicted upon soul, but trauma inflicted be it, self-mutilation of the most fundamental kind. Loki feels understanding begin to crystallize. He damaged himself, deliberately. More than damaged, severed. The Ancient One meets his gaze steadily. Among the masters, we call ITA Macron TM, a KH, a letter 1E47, letter 1E0D, a THE soul shard. It is one of the darkest applications of dimensional magic, the deliberate cleaving of one's own soul and the binding of those fragments to physical objects. The anchored pieces prevent the whole from passing on, even if the body is destroyed. He made himself immortal by fragmenting his own soul, Loki says flatly. Persistent would be a more accurate term than immortal. The soul is not meant to be divided. Each severing damages the whole, erodes the capacity for reason, corrupts the essential nature of the being. She pauses, her expression troubled. The degree of madness you witnessed suggests this was not a single act. One division might leave the soul weakened, but largely intact. Two would cause noticeable deterioration. But what you describe, consciousness so fractured, it can barely maintain coherent thought, that speaks to multiple severances, perhaps many. Multiple fragments. Loki's mind races through the implications. And each fragment would need to be destroyed before the whole could truly die. Precisely. The Ancient One tilts her head, her brow furrowing. The wizards have their own term for this practice. It has been centuries since I heard it spoken. We do not often have cause to discuss such things with the magical community, given the statute. She closes her eyes briefly. It was something to do with containment. A vessel of some kind. The word surfaces in Loki's memory like a corpse rising from deep water. Horcrux, he says quietly. The wizards call them Horcruxes. Yes, the Ancient One's eyes open. That was it, Horcrux. A crude term for a crude magic. Loki's thoughts turn backward through the centuries. There was a wizard in the Founders Iranot, one of the four, but someone who orbited their circle. Salazar mentioned him once. A former colleague who had grown obsessed with conquering death. His expression hardens. When the four discovered what he was attempting, it was one of the only times I ever saw them act in perfect unity. What became of this wizard? Dead. The four were thorough, and I assisted in my own way. Loki pauses. But clearly the knowledge survived, buried in some dark corner of wizarding lore, waiting for another fool desperate enough to tear his own soul apart for the promise of immortality. The Ancient One is silent for a moment. Multiple fragments, many, if the degradation is as severe as you describe. That means multiple anchors scattered across the planet. Objects that could be anything, hidden anywhere. A task made significantly more difficult by the fact that I have no idea what objects he might have used or where they might be hidden. The wraith itself may provide clues. If you can track its movements, observe what it seeks, what draws its attention, I intend to. But that is a long game, and in the meantime, I have two boys who nearly walked into a trap set by a fool of a headmaster in a castle that should have been impenetrable. Loki's voice carries an edge of frustration. I had not planned to accelerate their training so aggressively, but I find I have little choice. I cannot rely on Hogwarts to keep them safe. The Ancient One studies him with that unsettling perceptiveness she has cultivated over the centuries. You wish to bring them here, this summer. I want them to learn the foundations of the mystic arts enough to defend themselves against threats that wand magic alone cannot address. Loki meets her gaze steadily. You once told me that Camartage doors were open to any sincere seeker of knowledge. Does that offer still stand? Of course it does. A faint smile plays at the corners of her mouth. I am also most curious about these boys of yours. The last time you took such personal interest in mortals was with the four themselves. Draco is the child of my magic. And Harry is his shield brother and my ward. Loki's voice carries quiet certainty. They are both under my protection. Ah, understanding dawns in her eyes. Then they are fair hearts. It has been a very long time since any of fair heart have come to study the mystic arts. Too long. The statute of secrecy has done much damage severing the wizarding world from knowledge that should have been shared freely. Loki's jaw tightens. Wizards and sorcerers learned once from one another. The mixing of disciplines produced some of the most remarkable magical innovations the realm has ever seen. And now those techniques are lost, the Ancient One agrees. Not lost, merely waiting to be rediscovered. Loki allows himself a small smile. Multiple traditions, the Ancient One says. It is not a question. Every tradition I can give them access to, Sather, the mystic arts, wand magic, rune craft, combat, strategy, perhaps even the elemental arts of Ulfheim in time, his smile fades. There is something stirring, Urgudile, not just here. The threads across realms feel unsettled. I want those boys prepared for whatever emerges. The Ancient One considers this for a long moment. Bring them in the summer, she says finally. I will oversee their training personally. We will start with the fundamentals meditation, dimensional awareness, basic manipulation of environmental energies. It would be prudent to place runes upon them that suppress their magical cores during training, so that they learn to draw power from external sources rather than relying on their innate gifts. Agreed. I had planned something similar. Once they have grasped the foundations, we can begin to explore how the disciplines might complement one another. Her eyes gleam with something that might be anticipation. It has been centuries since I had students capable of such integration. This could prove illuminating for all of us. Loki inclines his head. Thank you, old friend. Do not thank me yet. The Ancient One's expression grows serious. These Solankas, these Horcruxes will not be passive. They are designed to preserve their creator's existence at any cost. They will resist destruction with every protection their maker could devise. I expected as much. More than that, her voice carries a warning weight. The fragments themselves possess a kind of awareness, not true consciousness, but instinct. A drive to survive that operates independently of the main soul. They will fight to exist. They will attempt to corrupt or control anyone who comes into contact with them, anyone who threatens them. Loki's eyes narrow. You speak from experience, from warnings. The elders spoke of such things when I was still in training ancient evils, rare but not forgotten. She pauses. Destroying a Solanka requires overwhelming force. Fiendfire, basilisk venom, the killing curse, though that carries its own costs. Few things can accomplish it. Loki's expression flickers at the mention of the killing cursey spell born from his own desperation to save Helga, refined into something terrible by Rowena's brilliant, grieving mind. He says nothing. Sather has ways of unmaking things that mortal magic cannot touch, he says finally, but I will keep those options in mind. A pause. Fiendfire seems excessive. Be careful, Loki. The Ancient One reaches out, and rests a hand briefly on his armored gesture of solidarity that crosses the vast gulf of their differing natures. Soul magic leaves scars that even Asgardian healing cannot touch. And the darkness that creates such things has a way of reaching back. I will be cautious. He covers her hand with his own for a moment. Until summer, then. Until summer. She releases him and steps back, already beginning to fade as the astral connection loosens. I look forward to meeting them. The courtyard of Camertage dissolves around him, and Loki opens his eyes to find himself back in his study at the estate, the fire burning low in the grate, and the first pale light of dawn creeping through the windows. Horcruxes. Multiple fragments of a madman's soul, scattered across Midgard like poisoned seeds waiting to sprout, each one fighting to survive, each one capable of corrupting those who came too close. From somewhere above him, Loki hears the creak of floorboard stone of the boys stirring, most likely Harry given how early it is. The child still wakes at odd hours, his body trained by years of being roused before dawn to cook breakfast for people who gave him nothing in return. Draco, by contrast, will sleep for precisely 7 hours and wake as if an internal alarm has sounded, a quirk of his that Loki has long since stopped questioning. Loki listens to the soft footsteps move toward the stairs, then pause, likely checking whether Draco's door is open, whether his shield brother is awake yet. The small domesticity of it tightens something in Loki's chest. These boys, his boys, whatever labels he might use for the outside world, the thing hunting Harry was patient, anchored. Mad, yes, but madness did not preclude danger, often it amplified it. And somewhere out there, pieces of that fractured soul waited in objects unknown, in places unknown, each one a tether keeping the monster bound to this world. The footsteps above resume, heading down the stairs now. Loki rises from his chair and moves toward the door. Harry will be surprised to find him awake, will probably apologize for disturbing him despite having done nothing wrong. Loki will wave off the apology and suggest an early breakfast, perhaps a walk through the gardens before Draco wakes. Small things, ordinary things, the building blocks of a childhood that should have been Harry's from the beginning. Loki opens the door and steps into the hallway, leaving the weight of Horcruxes and wraiths and soul fragments behind him for now. They will keep. The madman's anchors have waited a decade already. His children cannot. Harry wakes late, warm and comfortable in the softest bed he's ever slept in. Sunlight streams through the window, casting golden patterns on the floor, and for a moment he just lies there, savoring the unfamiliar feeling of being happy. The leather band is still fastened around his wrist, as it has been since Loki gave it to him months ago. He touches it, feeling the faint hum of magic beneath the leather, a connection to someone who cares. He's dressed and heading down to breakfast when he hears raised voices. Absolute Islander, this is outrageous. How dare they print such a frustrated noise. Harry's going to be devastated when he sees this. And my name, they're calling Malfoy like I'm still like I was ever. Draco's voice, sharp with fury. Harry quickens his pace and finds his friend in the morning room, pacing back and forth with a newspaper clutched in white-knuckled hands. His face is flushed, his movements rapid and agitatal, that restless energy that usually manifested as enthusiasm, now channeled into outrage. What's wrong? Draco whirls to face him, and for a moment his expression flickers with something protective, as if he'd wanted to spare Harry from whatever was in that paper. Then his jaw sets with determination. Brace yourself, he says grimly, and thrusts the newspaper at Harry. The headline makes Harry's stomach drop. Harry Potter, Dark Lord in training. Exclusive interview with Ronald Weasley reveals disturbing behavior from the boy who lived. Below the headline is a photograph of Ron Weasley, looking smug and self-important, clutching his rat dramatically to his chest. The image moves, showing Ron nodding solemnly and then clutching the rat tighter, as if protecting it from an imminent threat. By Rita Skeeter in a chance encounter at Diagon Alley, this reporter had the extraordinary opportunity to speak with Ronald Weasley. 11. a first-year Hogwarts student who has had extensive first-hand experience with the mysterious boy who lived. What young Mr. Weasley revealed should concern every witch and wizard in Britain. Since his dramatic defeat of he, who must not be named as an infant, Harry Potter has been notably absent from wizarding society. Where has he been? What has shaped him? The public whose safety he supposedly secured has a right to know the truth about such a significant public figure. He threatened to have his snake eat my pet, young Ronald Weasley reveals, visibly shaken by the memory. And his friend Draco Malfoy, who's pretending to be called Odinson, for some reason they're both dark wizards. Everyone knows Malfoy's father was a Death Eater. Potter punched me right in the face when I tried to warn him. Sources within Hogwarts confirm that Potter was sorted into Slytherin House, the traditional home of dark wizards, and has been seen consorting with known pureblood supremacist families. Additionally, this reporter has learned that Potter is a Parselmouther rare ability historically associated with Dark Lords, including he who must not be named himself. It was terrifying, young Weasley continues, eyes wide. His snake hissed at Scabbers. That's my rattan. Potter just laughed. I think he wanted to see it happen. When asked about Potter's demeanor at Hogwarts, Weasley paints a troubling picture. He doesn't talk to anyone outside of Slytherin. He and Malfoy are always whispering together, planning things. Dark things, probably. One must ask, has the boy who lived become the very thing he once defeated? The wizarding world waits with bated breath, perhaps, with good reason, with wands at the ready. This is lies, Harry says, his voice shaking. I never threatened his rat. Yer was just Colch wasn't even looking at the stupid thing, and I only punched him because he called your mother I know. Draco takes the paper back, looking like he wants to set it on fire. Actually, knowing Draco, he probably could set it on fire if he wanted to. It's the Daily Prophet. They'll print anything for a good story, and apparently Weasley was only too happy to provide one. He scowls at the photograph of Ron. Look at him, clutching that rat like he's some sort of hero. Visibly shaken by the memoirs, practically preening. But people will believe it. Harry feels sick. Everyone already whispers about me being in Slytherin. Now they'll think I'm actually evil. You're not evil. Draco's voice is fierce, his eyes bright with conviction. And anyone who believes this rubbish is an idiot who doesn't deserve your time or energy. He gestures emphatically at the paper. This Rita Skeeter clearly has no journalistic integrity whatsoever. Chance encounter at Diagon Alley's was probably lurking around hoping for exactly this kind of opportunity, and she didn't even try to get your side of the story. That's not how you find the truth. Despite everything, Harry feels a small spark of warmth at Draco's indignation on his behalf. That's Draco, quick to defend, quick to strategize, already thinking 3 steps ahead about how to fight back. Still, Harry slumps into a chair. This is going to make everything worse when we go back to school. Loki appears in the doorway, his expression unreadable. May I see the article? Draco hands it over. It's absolute slander, Father. They can't just libel, Loki corrects calmly, his eyes already scanning the page. Slander is spoken defamation. Libel is printed or published. An important distinction if we wish to pursue retraction or other legal remedies. He continues reading, his face growing colder with each paragraph. Though I note they've been quite careful in their construction. Careful, Draco sounds outraged. They called Harry a Dark Lord in training, with a question mark. Loki taps the headline. And note the framing throughout. They are not stating facts, they are reporting what Mr. Weasley claims. The statements of fact are attributed to a source which provides them legal cover. Additionally, he scans the article again, his lip curling slightly. They've invoked Harry's status as a significant public figure whose activities the public has a right to know. That phrasing is deliberate. Under the Defamation Act, public figures face a higher burden when bringing claims. They must demonstrate that the publication caused serious harm to their reputation and that the defendant either knew the statements were false or showed reckless disregard for the truth. Harry blinks. So they can just lie about me because I'm famous. Not precisely, but they can report on claims made by others about you, provided they present those claims as claims rather than established facts. They can speculate, insinuate, and ask leading questions all while maintaining just enough plausible deniability to make a lawsuit complicated. Loki sets the paper on the table, smoothing it flat with one hand. The prophet's lawyers have clearly advised them well. They've constructed this piece to maximize damage to your reputation while minimizing their legal exposure. Can your attorneys make them take back what they said? Harry asks without much hope. They can try. The Defamation Act does require publications to offer a right of reply in certain circumstances, and a formal complaint may prompt them to be more cautious in future coverage. Loki pauses, considering. However, I would counsel a different approach. What approach? Draco leans forward, his strategic mind clearly engaged. Consider what this article has accomplished. It has introduced a narrative of Harry Potter, the dark and dangerous Slytherin. A narrative built on the claims of a single disgruntled child and the innuendo of a journalist known for sensationalism. Loki meets Harry's eyes. Narratives can be countered with other narratives. Truth, presented compellingly, is a more powerful weapon than legal action that drags through courts for months while the damage compounds. You mean, tell our side of the story, Harry frowns. To another newspaper, perhaps. Or perhaps simply by living in a way that contradicts the picture Ms. Skeeter has painted. Actions observed by many witnesses over time are harder to dismiss than a single competing article. Loki settles into a chair across from them. There is an old saying in Asgard, the wolf cares not for the opinions of sheep, but that wisdom is incomplete. A wiser truth is this, the wolf who wishes to walk among the flock must give the sheep no reason to fear him not because he fears their bleeding, but because their fear serves no one. Harry considers this. So, don't react, just be myself. Be yourself, yes, but also bevisible. Let people see who you actually are, rather than the shadow this article has cast. Those who know you will not be swayed by such obvious manipulation. Those who do not know you will form their own judgments based on their observations. Loki's expression softens slightly. And those who choose to believe the worst despite evidence to the contrary, well, their opinions were never worth having. Draco nods vigorously. Yes, Father. We can. His eyes light up with that familiar spark of enthusiasm that means his mind is already racing through possibilities. We should make sure everyone sees Harry being completely normal and not evil when we get back to school, and I can tell people what actually happened on the train, loudly, in front of Furion. I would suggest something slightly less confrontational, Loki says dryly. But yes, the general principle is sound. Harry looks down at the newspaper, at Ron's smug face in the photograph. Dark Lord in training. It still hurts, he admits quietly. Knowing people will read this and think that. Of course it does. Loki's voice is gentle. Anyone who tells you that words cannot wound is either lying or has never had words wielded against them. But pain does not require surrender. You can hurt and still hold your head high. You can be wounded and still refuse to let the wound define you. He rises and rests a hand briefly on Harry's shoulder, that same grounding touch that Harry has come to recognize as Loki's way of saying what words alone cannot convey. My attorneys will send a formal response to the prophet demanding the opportunity to reply. Whether or not they comply, we will have established a record of objection. Beyond that, Loki squeezes his shoulder once. We will address this as we address all challenges, together and with the understanding that the truth is on our side. Harry nods, straightening in his chair. The sick feeling hasn't entirely gone away, but something else has joined it, something steadier. He has people in his corner now. People who believe him, people who will fight for him. Dark Lord in training. Let them believe what they want. He knows who he is. Azkaban prison that same morning, the newspaper slides under his cell door, a rare kindness. Sirius almost doesn't bother. What does the outside world matter anymore? But the headline catches his eye. Harry Potter, Dark Lord in training. He snatches the paper with trembling hands. Harry Hishery at Hogwarts, alive, growing up. Then he sees the photograph, a red-haired boy clutching a rat to his chest. Sirius stops breathing, the distinctive marking. The missing toe, the way it cowers, comfortable and kept. 10 years of Dementors haven't dimmed his memory of Peter Pettigrew's animagus form. Peter is alive. Peter is at Hogwarts. Peter is near Harry. Something cracks inside him, something frozen solid for over a decade. Rage pours through like liquid fire, burning away the despair and guilt. For the first time in a decade, Sirius Black feels to live. He closes his eyes and reaches for a transformation he hasn't attempted in years. His body shifts, shrinks, reforms. The Dementors glide past without pausing. Animals hold no interest for them. Dark Lord in training, the headline had said, as if Harry were the danger. The black dog bares his teeth. They have no idea what danger looks like. Chapter 20. The train ride back to Hogwarts is tense. Harry can feel the stairs the moment they board. Whispers follow them down the corridor like shadows, and more than one compartment door slides shut as they pass. The Daily Prophet article has done its work. Ignore them, Draco says firmly, though his jaw is tight with barely contained fury. They're idiots who believe everything they read. Easy for you to say, Harry mutters. They're not calling you our Dark Lord in training. No, they're calling me a Malfoy pretending to be an Odinson, which is arguably worse. Draco's eyes flash, as if I would ever claim that name again. They find an empty compartment near the back of the train. Hermione joins them shortly after, looking harried. I've been defending you both all morning, she says, dropping into the seat across from them. The things people are saying are absolutely ridiculous, as if Harry would threaten anyone's pet. And the idea that you're both somehow secretly evil. Thank you, Hermione, Harry says quietly. Her unwavering support makes some of the tightness in his chest ease. Weasley is being insufferable about it, she continues, her expression darkening. He's been telling anyone who'll listen that he's a hero for exposing the truth, but he's really a bully who said awful things and got punched for it. Which is exactly what I'm going to tell everyone, Draco says, his voice calm. Tonight, at dinner. In front of the entire school, Harry looks at him sharply. Draco, no, I'm done letting that lie stand. Draco's silver eyes are hard as steel. He's not wrong, actually, Hermione says thoughtfully. From a strategic standpoint, a public statement carries more weight than individual conversations. It becomes the official counter-narrative. Draco looks pleased. Exactly. Thank you, Hermione, Harry sighs. He's seen enough of Draco's family to know this is a cultural thing. Odinsons take honor and public declarations very seriously. Warriors and their codes. Just don't get expelled, he mutters, slumping in his seat. I make no promises. The great hall is buzzing with conversation when they enter, and Harry feels the weight of 100 stares settle on him like a physical thing. Whispers follow in their wake. Dark Lord in training, attacked Ron Weasley, Slytherin through and through. Ron Weasley at the Gryffindor table, looking smug and self-satisfied, basking in the attention his interview has earned him. Harry decides to keep his eyes fixed on the Slytherin table and tries to ignore it all. He's had practice, after all. 10 years of being the freak, the liar, the unwanted nephew. He knows how to make himself small, how to disappear into the background. But Draco is vibrating with barely contained fury beside him, and Harry knows that tonight there will be no disappearing. Maybe we could just talk to people individually, Harry tries, even though he knows it's futile. Explain what really happened without making a whole what? A whole scene. Draco's eyes flash. Harry, you don't whisper corrections in corners like you're ashamed. You speak the truth loudly enough that no one can pretend they didn't hear it. Dinner is half over when Draco rises from his seat. Harry's stomach drops. Here we go. Draco moves to the end of the Slytherin table closest to the high table where the professors sit. It's a strategic position, Harry realizes, visible to everyone. close enough to the teachers that they'll have to acknowledge him. Draco climbs onto the Slytherin table. Several professors look up in alarm. McGonagall half rises from her seat, her lips pressed into a thin line. Snape's expression is unreadable, though his eyes have narrowed. But Dumbledore's eyes twinkling in that unreadable way of his raises a hand to stop any intervention. Gasps ripple through the hall. A Ravenclaw girl drops her goblet. At the Gryffindor table, Ron Weasley's face drains of color. Harry wants to sink through the floor. Every eye in the Great Hall is on them, No and Draco, but also on Harry, because everyone knows this is about him. His skin prickles with the familiar urge to shrink, to become invisible, to be anywhere but the center of attention. He can feel the weight of hundreds of stares, some curious, some hostile, some gleeful at the prospect of drama. This is exactly what he didn't want. But then Draco's voice rings out, clear and strong and absolutely certain. Harry Potter did nothing dishonorable. The hall falls dead silent. Even the enchanted ceiling seems to still, the floating candles frozen in place, and something shifts in Harry's chest. I will tell you the true tale of what transpired on the journey to Hogwarts. Draco's voice carries to every corner of the room, powerful and commanding in a way that seems too large for an 11-year-old boy. He speaks like he's recounting a battle, like the truth is a weapon, and he's wielding it without mercy. Harry has seen Draco's father speak this way, that same formal cadence, that same absolute conviction. Harry imagines it's the way ancient warriors told stories of what happened so that history would remember it correctly. At the Hufflepuff table, students are leaning forward with wide eyes. The Ravenclaws are watching with analytical interest, some already whispering to each other. A few older Slytherins are exchanging glances that look like something between approval and calculation. Harry has spent his whole life being called a liar, freak, troublemaker, attention seeker. The Dursleys never believed a word he said, and why would they? He was just the unwanted nephew in the cupboard, making up stories about accidental magic to excuse his strangeness. Even here, in the wizarding world, people looked at his scar and decided who he was before he ever opened his mouth. The boy who lived, the chosen one. Or now, apparently, a dark lord in training who attacked an innocent boy on a train. No one ever asked him what really happened. No one ever believed him. Ronald Weasley's account would have you believe the worst of Harry Potter, Draco continues, and his voice drips with contempt. At the Gryffindor table, Ron looks like he's going to be sick. The Twinsfrid and Georgia watching with expressions that are surprisingly hard to read, their usual mischief replaced by something more serious. But nay, Draco's voice rises. My shield brother struck blows in defense of my dead mother. A collective intake of breath. Percy Weasley looks horrified. Someone at the Hufflepuff table whispers, his mother. The Wurchild brother draws confused looks from the Muggle-born students, but the purebloods seem to recognize the weight of it, an old term, rarely used, that speaks of a bond deeper than friendship. Shield brother. The word hits Harry like a physical thing. He didn't know how much he needed this until this moment. Someone standing up. Someone speaking for him. Someone's Yingy was there, and I saw what happened, and Harry Potter is not what they say he is. The red-headed coward laid vile insult to her memory with words that cannot and should not be repeated. Draco's eyes sweep the hall, cold and imperious, daring anyone to challenge him. And now, the same person who spoke such filth seeks to besmirch the name of my shield brother with vicious slander. Ron shrinks in his seat. A few Gryffindors near him are edging away, as if they don't want to be associated with him. Neville Longbottom is staring at Draco with something like awe. Professor McGonagall's expression has shifted from disapproval to something more complicated. Professor Sprout looks touched and has a hand over her heart. Snape Harry can't tell what Snape is thinking, but he hasn't moved to stop this. I am Draco Odinson. Draco draws himself up to his full height, which standing on a table makes him tower over everyone in the hall. His voice rings with the formal cadence of an old oath. And I declare before all assembled here that Harry Potter acted with honor. He defended the memory of the dead against one who would mock them. Any person of worth would have done the same. The silence stretches, thick and heavy. At the Gryffindor table, one of the Weasley twinchery thinks it's Fred. Slowly begins to clap. His brother joins him. A few Hufflepuffs pick it up, then some Ravenclaws. It's not thunderous applause, but it's something, an acknowledgement. Harry's throat is tight, and his eyes are burning in a way he refuses to acknowledge. The attention still makes his skin crawl. He still wants to sink through the floor. But underneath that, something warm is spreading through his chest, something that feels dangerously like hope. Draco hops down from the table with the easy grace of someone who's been trained to move, to fight, to command attention. He walks back toward his seat like he hasn't just upended the entire social order of Hogwarts. The whispers start immediately, but they sound different now. Less certain, more questioning. Zabini leans over as Draco sits down. That, he says with something like genuine admiration, was a performance. Draco rolls his eyes and ignores him. When Draco slides back into his seat, he doesn't look at Harry, just picks up his fork and resumes eating as if nothing happened. Harry swallows hard. "Thank you," he says quietly, so only Draco can hear. Draco's mouth quirks just slightly. "I'll always defend you, just like you'll be there to defend me. We fight at each other's side through everything." He finally glances at Harry, something fierce and certain in his grey eyes. "That's what shield brothers are for." Harry doesn't trust his voice to respond. But he nods, and Draco nods back, and something settles between Thema promise, unspoken but absolute. After dinner, as students file out of the Great Hall, the Weasley twins intercept them in the corridor. Harry tenses. Draco's hand moves instinctively toward the knife he keeps in his sleeve, a gesture so subtle most people wouldn't notice, but Harry does. Harry places a restraining hand on his arm. "Easy there, little snake," one of the twins says, holding up his hands in a gesture of peace. "We come bearing a white flag. Metaphorically speaking," the other adds. "We wanted to say that was impressive. Standing on a table in front of the whole school takes guts." Draco's eyes narrow. "Is there a point to this?" The twins exchange a glance. When they speak again, their usual joking tone is absent. "Ron's a prat sometimes," one says quietly. "What he said about your mum, that was out of line." "We didn't know," the other adds. "He didn't tell us that part. Just said Harry attacked him for no reason." Harry feels some of the tension leave his shoulders. "It wasn't for no reason." "Yeah," the first Twinfrid, Harry thinks, rubs the back of his neck. "We figured that out. Look, we're not apologizing for Ron, can do that himself when Mum gets through with him, but we wanted you to know that not all Weasleys are." "Thoughtless liars," Draco supplies coolly. The twins wince, but they don't argue. "We also respect a good dramatic gesture," the other twin says, the hint of a grin returning. "Standing on tables, making speeches, publicly shaming our brother. It's the kind of chaos we can appreciate. Consider this a truce." Draco regards them for a long moment. Harry can practically see him weighing the strategic value of having the Weasley twins as allies versus enemies. Finally, Draco inclines his head just slightly. "A truce. For now." The twins grin and disappear down the corridor, already whispering to each other. Harry lets out a breath. "That went better than expected." Draco resumes walking. "They're cunning, those two, wasted in Gryffindor," Harry snorts. Coming from Draco, that's practically a compliment. 3 days later, a crimson envelope arrives at the Gryffindor table. The entire hall falls silent as the howler rises into the air, unfolds itself, and begins to scream in a voice that Harry suspects can be heard from the astronomy tower. "Ronald Bilious Weasley, how dare you bring shame upon this family with your vile language, speaking ill of the dead? I raised you better than this. Your father and I are absolutely disgusted. If you ever, and I mean ever, say anything so despicable again, I will pull you out of that school so fast your head will spin." The howler shreds itself into confetti, and Ron looks like he wishes the floor would swallow him whole. Harry almost feels sorry for him. Almost. Draco, meanwhile, is buttering his toast with an expression of serene satisfaction. Percy wrote to their mother, Hermione says from across the table. She's been taking more of her meals here lately, something about refusing to let house rivalries dictate her friendships. She'd said, chin lifted in that particular way that meant she was daring anyone to comment. No one had. The night of your speech, she adds, sounding almost impressed. Did he? Draco says mildly, not looking up from his breakfast. Harry hides a smile, warriors and their codes, but also Slytherins and their cunning. Maybe the Sorting Hat knew what it was doing after all. The days following Draco's speech settle into something almost like normalcy. The whispers continue, but they're different, no curious rather than hostile, speculative rather than condemning. Ron Weasley keeps his head down and his mouth shut, at least when Harry and Draco are within earshot. The howler from Mrs. Weasley has become legendary. First years reenact it in the corridors. Someone has charmed a suit of armor on the third floor to bellow, Ronald Bilious Weasley, whenever a redhead walks past. By Monday morning, when Harry and Draco file into defense against the dark arts, the curious stares have become almost background noise. The defense against the dark arts classroom looks different. Harry notices it immediately. Dusty corners have been cleaned, the windows thrown open to let in pale winter light, and the strange, pickled creatures that used to line the shelves have been replaced with books and what appear to be training dummies. The air smells faintly of pine and something else, something sharp and clean that Harry can't quite identify. Professor Quirrell's nervous energy is gone. In its place stands a woman Harry has never seen before. She's tall and elegant, with chestnut brown hair swept up in a complicated knot and sharp hazel eyes that sweep across the assembled students with cool assessment. Her robes are well cut and distinctly American in styleless flowing than British wizarding fashion, more structured. She carries herself like someone who has never once doubted her own competence. Good morning, she says, and her accent confirms it American with a crisp professionalism that reminds Harry of the lawyers who visited the Odinson estate. I am Professor Adelaide Roosevelt. I will be your defense against the dark arts instructor for the remainder of the term. Whispers ripple through the classroom. An American, Roosevelt like the president, as Professor Quirrell has taken an unexpected leave of absence. Professor Roosevelt continues, as if she hasn't noticed the murmuring. I have been brought in to ensure your education continues without interruption. Now, she waves her wand, and the training dummies shift into fighting stances. I understand your previous instruction has been somewhat theoretical. We will be correcting that. Draco leans over to Harry. I like her already, he whispers. Harry has to agree. There's something about the way Roosevelt moves, the way she holds her wand, that speaks of real experience. Not like Quirrell, who had flinched at his own shadow. The lesson is intense. Roosevelt has them casting shield charms within the first 10 minutes, correcting wand movements with sharp efficiency, demonstrating proper defensive stances. By the end of the hour, Harry's arm aches and he's learned more than he did in an entire term with Quirrell. When the bell rings, students begin packing up their bags. Mr. Odinson, Mr. Potter. Roosevelt's voice cuts through the noise. A moment, please. Harry and Draco exchange glances. Around them, their classmates file out, casting curious looks over their shoulders. Zabini raises an eyebrow at Draco, who shrugs in response. The door closes behind the last student. Professor Roosevelt waves her wand in a complex pattern, and Harry feels something settle over the rumor heaviness in the air, a sense of being enclosed. Privacy wards, he realizes, strong ones. Well, Roosevelt says, and her voice has changed, American accent smoothing into something else, something more familiar. That was exhausting. Harry blinks. Draco has gone very still beside him. Roosevelt's form begins to shimmer. The dark hair lightens, the features sharpen, the elegant American witch dissolving like morning mist to reveal Fathia. Draco's shriek is loud enough to make Harry wince. Larkib cause idis Loki, unmistakably Loki, standing there in the defense classroom with a deeply amused expression chuckles. I am very glad I put up those privacy wards, he says dryly. That would have been heard from the astronomy tower. Beauty how Draco seems to have lost the ability to form complete sentences. His eyes are huge, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. Fathia, yes, we've established that. Loki's eyes are warm with amusement. Hello, my little dragon. Draco launches himself at his father, and Loki catches him easily, pulling him into a tight embrace. Harry watches, something warm and complicated twisting in his chest. How long have you been here? Draco demands, pulling back but not letting go entirely. Since when? Why didn't you tell me? I was sitting there thinking she seemed competent, but wondering why her dueling stance looked a bit off O'Norn's. I was critiquing you in my head the whole lesson. Were you? Loki's lips twitch with amusement. Do tell. It's just the way you held your wand during the shield charm demonstration. It was a bit. Draco cuts himself off, flushing. You did that on purpose. Roosevelt is meant to be competent but not exceptional, Loki confirms. I couldn't very well reveal myself by being too skilled. But Draco asks, why are you here? Is something wrong? His expression shifts, worry creeping in. Peace, Draco. Loki's hand rests on his son's shoulder, steadying. Nothing is wrong. I am here because you and Harry are here, and I intend to ensure your safety personally. His gaze shifts to Harry, who has been hanging back, trying to give them space. Both of you, Harry swallows. You're here for us. I am. Loki releases Draco and moves toward Harry, his expression softening. I made you a promise, Harry, that you would not return to the Dursleys and that you would be protected. I do not make promises lightly. He pauses, glancing back at Draco with something like pride warming his features. I saw your performance in the Great Hall, standing on the Slytherin table, declaring Harry's innocence before the entire school. His lips twitch. I believe I suggested something slightly less confrontational. Draco flushes. It needed to be said, loudly, so no one could pretend they didn't hear it. So it did. Loki's voice is warm. You assessed the situation, made your own judgment, and acted with conviction. I am proud of you, Draco. Even if your methods were rather more theatrical than I might have chosen. Draco stands a little straighter, practically glowing. But you have the estate, and Harry struggles to give words to his worries. Important things you can't just be a professor. I can be whatever I choose to be. Loki's voice is gentle but firm. And I choose to be here. There is no responsibility I hold that matters more. Harry doesn't know what to say. His throat feels tight, and his eyes are doing something embarrassing that he refuses to acknowledge. Now, Loki continues, his tone shifting to something more businesslike, there are matters we need to discuss. I need you both to be cautious. Do not go wandering the grounds alone. Do not leave the castle after dark. And if you see anything suspicious, you come to me immediately. Not Dumbledore, me. You don't trust Dumbledore, Harry says. It's not a question. Loki's smile is thin. The headmaster and I have different priorities. I will not allow his to supersede the safety of my children. My children, Harry's breath catches. The words hang in the air between them, warm and terrifying and impossibly real. While Draco peppers his father with more questions, can we tell anyone? How long have you been here? Does Uncle Thor know? Is your American accent really that good, or is it magic? Harry hangs back slightly, watching. Loki answers with patient amusement, one hand resting on Draco's shoulder like he can't quite bear to let go of his son now that the pretense is over. The affection between them is so obvious, so natural, that Harry feels a familiar ache in his chest. But it's not jealousy, not anymore. Because Loki Isha. Harry thinks about the Dursleys, about 10 years of being unwanted, invisible, a burden to be hidden away. He thinks about arriving at Hogwarts last year, still half expecting to wake up and find it was all a dream, still waiting for someone to realize there had been a mistake and send him back to the cupboard. And then Loki had come, had seen what the Dursleys were, had looked at Harry and said, "You will not go back there. Not a request. Not a negotiation, just a fact, a promise. And now Loki is here at Hogwarts disguised as a professor, teaching defense against the dark arts, watching over them, protecting them. Harry has spent his whole life being no one's priority, an afterthought, an inconvenience, the boy who was left on a doorstep and forgotten for a decade. But Loki, who has an estate to run, who commands respect from everyone Harry has ever seen him interact with, who clearly has more important things to worry about than two schoolboy stuck attaching position just to be close enough to keep them safe. Harry doesn't fully understand the Odinson family. He knows they're old, powerful, and different in ways he doesn't understand. He knows Draco's uncle can call lightning, and that their grandmother sends gifts that shimmer with magic, unlike anything in Diagon Alley. He knows there are secrets, things Draco hints at, but doesn't fully explain. But he understands Thighs. Loki chose to be here. For Draco, yes, but also for Harry. That still doesn't feel quite real. Harry, Loki's voice cuts through his thoughts, and Harry realizes he's been staring. Are you all right? Harry nods, not trusting his voice for a moment. Then, quietly, thank you for being here. Something softens in Loki's expression, something that looks almost like the way he looks at Draco. There is nowhere else I would rather be, Loki says simply, and Harry believes him. Draco, oblivious to the moment, tugs on his father's sleeve. But seriously, can we tell anyone? Because Zabini has been insufferable about Professor Roosevelt's dueling credentials, and I would love to see his face when— No, Loki says firmly, but there's a hint of amusement in his eyes. You cannot, Draco sighs dramatically. Fine. But when this is all over, I'm telling Jevrion. Harry smiles quietly to himself. Some things, at least, never change. The walk from the headmaster's office to the defense against the dark arts classroom has never felt so long. Albus Dumbledore moves through the familiar corridors of Hogwarts, past sleeping portraits and flickering torches, and tries to order his thoughts. Sirius Black has escaped from Azkaban. The Ministry is demanding Dementors at the gates. And he must now deliver this news to the being who has taken up residence in his school, the being who wears the face of an American witch named Adelaide Roosevelt, but is something far older and far more dangerous. He does not want to have this conversation. But then, he has never wanted to have any conversation with Loki Odinson. Not the first time, when he was young and foolish and seeking power. Not the second time, when he was desperate and afraid and seeking salvation. And certainly not now, when all his carefully laid plans are unraveling around him. The memory rises as he walks unbidden, unwelcome, impossible to suppress. The Odinson estate, 1945. Dumbledore remembers standing in a field, desperate and alone, speaking not the formal words he had tried a dozen times over the years, but the truth. I am asking, begging for help, please. And the path had appeared. He remembers the library different than his first visit, settled now, the windows showing ordinary English countryside instead of impossible landscapes. He remembers Odinson's unexpected warmth. Albus Dumbledore, you came back. He had pleaded his case with all the eloquence he possessed. Painted a picture of the suffering, the death, the tens of thousands who had already fallen to Gelert's crusade. He had debased himself utterly, because what was pride compared to the fate of the world? And Odinson had listened. Then he had refused. I am a guardian of the realms, a defender against threats from outside, he had said. Beings that would extinguish your son for sport. Grindelwald is mortal. Dangerous by your standards, certainly, but mortal. Midgard must learn to fight its own battles. Dumbledore remembers the despair that had settled into his bones. He had come so far, for nothing, however. Odinson's voice had cut through his thoughts. I said I would not fight your battle. I did not say I would send you away empty-handed. And then he had said something that still echoes in Dumbledore's mind. You could be a champion of this realm, Albus Dumbledore. You have the power, the intelligence, the potential, but you lack the will. You came here asking me to solve your problem because you are afraid to face Grindelwald yourself. The words had struck home with painful accuracy, because Odinson was right. Dumbledore was afraid not of Gellert's power, but of facing the friend he had loved, the man he had failed to stop all those years ago. What happened next that is what Dumbledore has never been able to forget. Odinson had turned to a writing desk that Dumbledore could have sworn wasn't there a moment before. He had picked up a piece of parchment, ordinary parchment, the kind you could buy in any stationer's shop, and a quill. And then he had begun to write. Dumbledore remembers the pressure building in his ears, in his chest, behind his eyes. The shadows in the corners of the library deepening and writhing like living things. The fire in the hearth twisting through colors he had no names for. The books on the shelves trembling, their pages rustling with whispers in languages that predated human speech. He remembers something cracking not in the room, but somewhere deeper, somewhere fundamental. He felt it in his bones, in his magic, in the very essence of what he was. And he remembers understanding, with a clarity that has never left him, exactly how small he truly was. How insignificant. All his power, all his knowledge, all his ambition before this being, it amounted to nothing at all. And Odinson was just sitting there, scribbling on a bit of parchment as casually as if he were writing a grocery list. The quill had stopped. Odinson had blown on the parchment once, folded it neatly in thirds, and held it out. "There you are." His tone had been light, conversational, as if he hadn't just done something that Dumbledore suspected the greatest magical theorists in history couldn't begin to explain. Dumbledore remembers his own voice cracking as he asked what it was. Remembers Odinson explaining a weapon suited to his particular battle, something that would summon the shadows of all those Gellert had killed, let him feel the weight of their hatred and grief and terror. And he remembers asking about the cost. There was always a cost. "Not to you," Odinson had said, his eyes glittering with amusement. "The magic is mine. Consider it a gift." He had smiled, then genuinely smiled, warm and almost paternal. "You found me twice, Albus Dumbledore, not because you battered down my wards, but because you finally learned to knock. That is no small thing. And you listened. When your friend did not, you heard my warnings about the Hallows, even if he refused to. That is worth rewarding." 3 months later, in the ruins of Nurmengard, Dumbledore had torn that parchment in half. The shadows came. They rose like smoke, coalescing into hundreds of accusing forms. And Gellert, brilliant, terrible Gellert, who feared nothing, had screamed and fallen to his knees, the elder wand slipping from fingers gone slack with horror. Among the shadows, Dumbledore had seen a face he knew, pale hair drifting, broken eyes filled with sorrow. Ariana, looking at Gellert, not at Albus, at Gellert. The duel ended moments later, and Dumbledore has never forgotten the lesson. Loki Odinson handed him that victory like spare change, like it cost him nothing. Like he could create 100 more such weapons before breakfast and never notice the effort. That day, Odinson had been warm, almost kind. He had seen potential in Dumbledore, had called him a possible champion, had rewarded his humility with a gift beyond price. But that was nearly 50 years ago, and Dumbledore is no longer the man who knelt in that field and said please. He suspects Odinson knows that. Dumbledore stops walking. He has arrived at the defense classroom without quite realizing it. The door stands before him, solid oak, utterly ordinary. Behind it sits a being who could end him without a second thought, wearing the face of a middle-aged American witch and teaching first years about shield charms. He takes a breath, straightens his robes, reminds himself that he is Albus Dumbledore, chief warlock of the Wizengamot, supreme mugwump of the International Confederation of Wizards, headmaster of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. It doesn't help. He opens the door. Professor Adelaide Roosevelt is sitting behind her desk, reviewing lesson plans. She looks up as Dumbledore enters, and her expression shifts to polite inquiry. "Headmaster, what brings you here at this hour?" Dumbledore closes the door behind him with a wave of his hand. "There is no point in pretense. We have a situation," he says. "Sirius Black has escaped from Azkaban." Roosevelt sets down her quill. Something flickers behind her borrowed hazel isinterest, perhaps, or calculation. "Has he now?" This is the first escape in the prison's history. The Ministry is in an uproar. Dumbledore moves further into the room. They're demanding we increase security at Hogwarts. They want to station Dementors at the gates. Absolutely not. The voice is still Roosevelt's, but the tone is pure Odensankled and absolute. I agree, but the Ministry, there is no but, Dumbledore. Roosevelt rises from her chair, and as she does, the glamour falls away. The chestnut hair darkens to black, the soft features sharpen, and suddenly the room feels smaller, the shadows deeper. Loki Odinson stands before him in his true form, and Dumbledore is reminded once again of that terrible library, that casual display of impossible power. He does not flinch. He has had practice. I have already woven additional protections into the wards since my arrival, Loki continues. No creature with malicious intent will be able to pass through them. Dementors are foul things that feed on human suffering. They will not set footer wherever they have on these grounds. Dumbledore nods. He had expected this. Had known, even as he walked here, that he would not be able to negotiate on this point. Speaking of Harry, he says, because he must address this, even knowing how the conversation will end. I've received the formal notification from your law speakers regarding the change in his guardianship. Then you know it has been settled. I know what the documents say. Dumbledore moves to the chair across from Loki's desk, feeling the weight of his years pressing down on him. What concerns me is what they don't address. The blood wards at Privet Drive are no longer relevant. They are essential. Dumbledore leans forward, willing Loki to understand. The protection Lily's sacrifice created anchored through her sister's blooded is ancient magic, powerful magic. As long as Harry could call that place home, he was safe from Voldemort and his followers. They could not touch him there. And yet his relatives could. Loki's voice goes dangerously soft. Tell me, Dumbledore, were you aware of the abuse Harry suffered at their hands? The cupboard under the stairs where he slept for 10 years. The meals withheld, the labor demanded, the endless reminders that he was unwanted. Dumbledore's hands tighten on the arms of the chair. He could lie. He could claim ignorance, plead negligence, play the role of the well-meaning old man who simply didn't know. But Loki's eyes are ancient and knowing, and Dumbledore suspects that lies would be unwise. I knew, he says quietly. The silence that follows is terrible. You knew, Loki's voice is soft, almost gentle. It is somehow more frightening than shouting would be. You knew, and you left him there anyway. The blood wards were not your only consideration. Loki moves around the desk, and Dumbledore forces himself not to shrink back in his chair. Tell me, Headmaster, tell me what you were truly thinking when you left a baby on a doorstep in the cold of night, when you received reports of his mistreatment and did nothing, when you watched him arrive at Hogwarts, thin and flinching, and felt. What? Satisfaction. Dumbledore closes his eyes. He has justified this to himself 1,000 times, the greater good, the prophecy, the necessity of shaping Harry into the weapon he would need to become. Voldemort is not gone, he says, merely diminished. One day he will return, and when he does, Harry will have to face him. The prophecy, the prophecy. Loki's tone drips with contempt. So you decided to forge a weapon. A boy raised without love, desperate for belonging, grateful for any scrap of acceptance the wizarding world might offer. A boy who would sacrifice himself willingly because he had never been taught that his life had value. Each word lands like a blow. Dumbledore wants to argue, to explain, to make Loki understand the impossible calculus of war. But the worst part, the part he cannot escape, is that nothing Loki has said is untrue. The needs of the many, he begins. Do not speak to me of sacrifice. Loki's voice cracks like thunder, and for a moment the shadows in the room seem to move. I have watched civilizations rise and fall. I have seen men justify every atrocity imaginable in the name of the greater good. And I have learned that those who sacrifice children for their causes are never as righteous as they believe themselves to be. Dumbledore cannot meet his eyes. Harry will not return to the Dursleys, Loki says, and his voice carries the weight of absolute certainty. He will spend his summers at the Odinson estate. He will be cared for, protected, valued. This is not a request. This is not a negotiation. This is simply what will occur. And if Voldemort returns, Dumbledore asks quietly, if he finds a way to reconstitute himself and comes for Harry, then he will discover that there are powers in this world he does not understand and cannot defeat. Loki's smile is thin and cold. I told you once that I do not fight Midgard's battles. That remains true. But Harry Potter is under my protection now, and I defend what is mine. The words hang in the air between them. Your blood wards are a hedge against foxes, Dumbledore. Loki steps back, and the pressure in the room eases slightly. I have held the line against forces that would unmake your world. Do not speak to me of protection. Dumbledore bows his head. There is nothing to say. No argument that will hold weight against this being who once handed him victory over Grindelwald like a trinket who sees through his careful justifications to the cold calculations beneath. He thinks of the parchment he tore in Nurmengard, the shadows that rose to condemn Gellert, the victory that was handed to him between sips of tea by a Norse deity who could have ended the war in the blink of an eye if he'd cared to. He has never been able to challenge Loki Odinson. He never will be. I will ensure the Dementors do not enter the grounds, he says finally. It is the only thing he can offer. The Ministry will not be pleased, but I will handle them. See that you do. Loki moves toward the door, his form already beginning to shimmer as he pulls the Roosevelt glamour back into place. Between one step and the next, the sharp-featured man becomes the elegant American witch, and only the eyes remain the same ancient, knowing, utterly implacable. I am many things, Headmaster, Professor Roosevelt says, her voice carrying that borrowed American accent. Patient is not one of them. Dumbledore blinks, and he is in his own office. He sits there for a long moment, torn between indignation and something uncomfortably close to gratitude. 4 flights and all those moving staircases, after all. His knees aren't what they used to be. But Loki would have walked him to the door once, would have called Himmelbusselbusthis Andelbusthat, warm and almost familiar. Tonight it had been Dumbledore Headmaster, as cold and distant as if they had never shared tea in that impassable library. The fire crackles low. Fawkes sleeps. And Dumbledore feels every one of his 150 years. The elder wand hums at his side of the wand he won, because an ancient being of unknowable power had scribbled something on a piece of parchment and handed it to him like a shopping list. He thinks of Harry Potter, the boy he had meant to shape into a willing sacrifice, the boy who was supposed to arrive at Hogwarts desperate for love, ready to die for the first people who showed him kindness. Instead, Harry had arrived with a family, with protection, with a sense of his own worth that Dumbledore had never intended him to have. All his careful plans, undone by a mythical being who had decided in a whim, perhaps, or out of affection for his son's friend to interfere. Dumbledore should be scrambling to salvage what he can, to find new ways to ensure Harry fulfills his destiny. Instead, he finds himself remembering the man who had knelt in a field and said please, the man Odinson had deemed worthy of a gift. He is not sure when he stopped being that man. He doesn't think he even noticed it happening. He rises slowly, joints aching, and makes his way to the door. There is work to be done, Dementor negotiations to handle, a school to protect, an escaped convict to find. And somewhere, buried deep beneath the calculations and contingencies, a small voice whispers that perhaps losing this battle is not the worst thing that could have happened. Perhaps Harry Potter deserves to be more than a weapon, and perhaps Dumbledore could still be more than this.